We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys! Here is part 3 of What If Naruto Became a Jonin Sensei. He was left broken from the death of his parents. The one man who had salvaged the pieces burned to ashes in front of his eyes. At times, he questioned the meaning of life. But who knows? Maybe these 3 little genin might show him the answer. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 5, The Test Part 1. Twack! The incoming fist was nothing but a blur to his Sharingan before he felt the impact against his forehead protector launching him through the air. He hit the ground harshly, coughing as air was knocked out of his lungs, before he rolled to a sudden stop. His world-spinning Sasuke felt himself drifting in and out of unconsciousness from the blow he just received. Not too far from him, lying in the grass, was Sakura, knocked out cold from the receiving end of Naruto's punches. It would seem he wasn't joking when he said he wasn't taking them serious from their first test. After the humiliating destruction of his shadow clone, any test after that was him coming at them with no mercy. The results were as expected. The first time they lasted only 10 seconds. The second time a full 20. Slowly but surely their times of keeping conscious increased seconds by seconds. At present they were averaging 2 minutes. But only just. It was always Sakura going down first. He suspected he was still sore from her fluke win. Then it was himself. Try as he may, his eyes couldn't keep up with the Jounin's speed. It was always Konohamaru who would last the longest, being the most durable out of the 3. Though not as fast as himself, the young genin had more stamina and ninjutsu at his disposal. Not to mention he sure could take a punch. Sasuke winced as he witnessed Konohamaru take a brutal blow to the face, the young Sarutobi stunned from the blow. Showing no mercy, Naruto wrapped a hand around the genin's throat and hauled him into the air, letting his feet dangle from the ground. With actions moving in slow motion to his Sharingan, Sasuke witnessed the young Sarutobi slam to the earth with a shattering force that shook the ground. Ouch! A mini crater had formed in the earth from the force of impact. Konohamaru's form was unresponsive as Naruto hauled him over his shoulder and casually walked over towards him, whistling a jaunty tune. Konohamaru was dropped to the ground like a sack of potatoes before Naruto pulled out his familiar book. Not bad, kiddies. You lasted 2 minutes and 15 seconds this time. Having no energy left to fight the blissful feeling of sleep, Sasuke weakly gave Naruto the finger before his head dropped back into unconsciousness. Naruto smirked down at his reaction before he put his book away and quietly observed the trio. They were improving, slightly. Not to say he knocked out a few of their brain cells on purpose. No. He was slowly testing them, gathering statistics of their overall prowess. Be it on D ranks or either on his personal conditioning test, he was always observing. It had only been a month of them being the official Team 7, and so far he was quite impressed with their drive. For each of his students he kept evaluation cards of their overall skill levels. They were ranked from the 3 divisions of jutsu to their intelligence, strength, speed, stamina, and finally hand seals. Pulling out a pen and piece of paper from his vest pocket, he jotted down a few notes for each. Sakura, somewhat improvement in taijutsu. Still suffers from low reserves. Needs ninjutsu and genjutsu to compensate. Genjutsu recommended. More physical conditioning needed. Perfect chakra control can be experimented with, awaiting future testing. Some instances show hidden personality of rage. He drew inner Sakura. Sasuke, improvement in taijutsu. Somewhat adaptation to movements. Overall weapon skills improved. Prone to heavy reliance on eyes. Arrogance disappearing, he added a small smiley face. High fire elemental nature skill. Suggest more overall training. Konohamaru, surprising taijutsu and ninjutsu. 2 elemental nature types consisting of fire and earth. Extremely durable and high stamina. Only weakness is genjutsu. Large chakra reserves, very large chakra reserves. He drew a crude drawing of a tank. The young Sarutobi was a bit of a conundrum. It would seem there was more to the young Sarutobi behind that goofy grin of his. Naruto wasn't fooled by his smile. He had seen more sincere grins on the faces of IWA Nin that tried to kill him than on that boy. Well, there was no problem he couldn't solve, unless it was those Kami-forsaken Rubik's Cubes, but so far it had been smooth sailing being an official team sensei. He glanced up to sky, rubbing his chin at that. Naruto-sensei. He liked the sound of that. Peering down at the unconscious Genin, he chuckled to himself. This was his team now. It wasn't like those Umbu days where his squad mates could take care of themselves. These were children. 3 lives depended on him when outside the safe walls of Konoha. Gazing from one face to another, he nodded to himself before he pulled his mask down and bit his thumb on his sharp canine, drawing blood. Securing the cloth back into place, he quickly went through a set of hand seals, slamming his hands on the ground. Summoning Jutsu. In a puff of smoke, a very large bulldog appeared with a small pub sitting atop of his head. Sup, boss? What's good? Though the smallest and, to his hidden displeasure, the cutest of his ninja hounds, Pakken had a deep voice. It was comical to hear such a voice come from a tiny dog. Naruto would bug the pug just to hear him talk sometimes. Naruto raised his hand in greeting. Hey boys. I actually need a little service from Bull here. The large bulldog barked at the sound of this name and obediently trudged toward his master. Naruto patted his head, getting the palm of his hand licked, and lowered himself, allowing Pakken to jump on his shoulder. Naruto stooped to bull's eye level, scratching the large dog under the side of his neck, and was rewarded with pants of appreciation. I need you to carry those 3 little kitties over there on your back. Without question, Bull couldn't speak. The large dog gently scooped up the 3 unconscious Genin securely on his back and began to follow Naruto as he slowly walked back to the village, pulling out make-out temptation for Pakken's reading pleasure. So these are the kitties. Yep. At first I wanted to kill them and hide the bodies. I smiled. But after a while they're not so bad. Flip the page. Wow, boss. So what makes them so special? I mean, out of all those these teams you failed, what makes this team so unique? The answer was simple. Jinchuuriki and Uchiha. Seriously. Politics as usual, eh? Page. Same as always. By the way, how come you never offered if I can touch your paws yet? They were really soft. Did you bring me jerky? If I said no, would you still let me squeeze them? No jerky. No paws, Page. PFF fine. Here I was going to give you a tummy scratch. I guess only Bull is going to get my special treatment. Fine, I'll let you touch my paws. Geez, that's my boy. I bet Riha-chan will be happy to see you guys. Riha-chan is home. She's out shopping but should be home soon. She had moved in with him. Not that he would complain. Ever. Have I ever mentioned I love you, boss? Naruto rolled his eye. Please, you dumped me for Riha-chan, you traitor. Can you blame me? Who can stand against her feminine charms? I can. Bull. Woof. No, not you, moron. Shut up. Bull ducked his head in shame. Pakken. Be nice, you know how sensitive Bull is. Don't defend him. As big as he is, he's got the guts of a fawn. It's not his fault. He has self-esteem issues. Plus you guys always bully him, no pun intended. Whatever. As I was saying, bullshit. Dear Kami Bull, I'm not talking to you. The large dog smiled sheepishly. Sighing, he shook his head. Dumbass. Anyways, remember that time you nearly cried because she wouldn't s. Naruto clamped a hand over the pub's mouth, silencing him. He was ignoring the stares he got from villagers at the sight of a Jonin and his talking dog. Not to mention the 7-foot-length, 300-pound bulldog carrying 3 unconscious Genin. You promise to never speak of that again. He spoke dryly, removing his hand from the pub's face. Well, you promised you'll take us to see All Dogs Go to Heaven. But did you keep your promise? No. I didn't. Oh, my bad. I have that on DVD anyway. Lies. I'm serious. I got that and this new TV imported from Moon Country. 70 inches of pure entertainment. So out of the blue, you just randomly got a dog movie? Well, yeah, I was thinking about you guys. What about those stupid amphibians? Oh, someone was jealous. They're okay. Just okay. What happened to Gamma, whatever his face? Gamabunta, Naruto corrected. Plus you guys are way more awesome than frogs. Lies. I have no reason to lie. The pug leapt off his head, landing in front of the street, blocking his path. Look at me in my eyes and tell me you love us more than you love the frogs. Tell me you love me. The sound of his voice caused onlookers to stop and stare in shock. Putting his book away slowly into his pouch, Naruto calmly went down on one knee and held a hand over his heart. Pakin. I love my ninja hounds more than any talking amphibian, no matter how big and strong they are, could ever be. I love you. Sweetening the deal, Naruto magically made a piece of jerky appear in his gloved hand. Pakin. He began slowly. Will you accept this jerky? Oh Naruto, you shouldn't have. He immediately took the tasty treat from his hands and with a small leap nestled himself at the top of Blonde's head. One for you to bowl. With a wave of his hand, another piece of jerky appeared before he tossed it to the large dog. It was snatched into his awaiting mouth and eaten in one large gulp. Naruto slowly raised himself to his feet, dusting of his pants. Feeling eyes on him, he glanced to see the entire street of traffic halted to stare at the scene. The hell you all gawking at? Can't a man tell his talking dogs he loves them? People began to move at the sound of his voice, only pausing momentarily to stare as if they couldn't believe what they had just seen. Geez, people these days. Bull barked in agreement. Pakin was too busy munching on his jerky to reply. When the trio of Genin awoke, they found themselves resting in a comfortable leather couch. Dazed and confused, they glanced around, finding themselves in an expensive-looking apartment. It was wide and open, and to their shock, directly in front of them was a huge flat-screen TV. Behind it all was elaborate windows showcasing a sunny view of the village. What caused their shock wasn't the television but the dog who was watching the TV seated on a small coffee table, lazily flipping through channels with its remote. Feeling eyes on him, Pakin fixed the trio with a boring gaze before he returned his attention back to his show. Boss, they're awake. The sound of the voice caused the Genin to stare in shock at the small pug. Had a dog just talked? Their moment of wonder was interrupted by the voice of their sensei coming from behind them. Oh. Welcome to my home, children. Three heads turned to look at Naruto, who was seated on a large oak kitchen table with his face stuck in his book. Behind him they could see an elaborate kitchen with the smell of something delicious coming from the oven. It was Sasuke who voiced his confusion. Why are we here? He jabbed a thumb at the pub. And what's up with that dog? I never knew dogs could talk. Naruto lowered his book and fixed him a lazy stare. Well, to answer your first question, I brought the three of you here because frankly, I didn't want to carry three unconscious Genin around Konoha to your homes. That would have taken a substantive amount of time and effort. He ignored their glare. And that dog is one of my ninja hounds. His name is Pakin. You'd be surprised how animals can talk. At the mention of his name, the pug waved a paw lazily over his shoulder without diverting his attention from his TV show. Yo! They trio dumbly waved back. Not that the pug noticed. Before any of them could question their sanity, a loud bark nearly made them jump from their seats, and down a nearby hallway they heard the sound of heavy thumps before a very large bulldog appeared out of the hallway. This is Bull. My largest and strongest ninja hound. He can't talk though. Being ever friendly with humans, not counting those he was sent to kill, Bull marched up to the startled Genin and eagerly began to sniff and lick their palms. Naruto chuckled at their reactions. No worries kiddies, he's friendly, most of the time. Relaxing at his words, they began to lightly pat the huge dog and got rewarded with pants of approval. Rubbing the underside of his chin, Sakura frowned in thought. Sensei. Why can't Bull speak like Pakin? Underneath his mask, Naruto frowned. Poor guy had his voice box crushed when he was just a puppy. He leaned his elbow against the table, resting a fist under his chin. Over the top of his book, his lone eye fixed a sad glance at Bull, all the while panting happily at the attention of the young students. He wasn't treated very well by his breeder. During the era of the clan wars, Ninken, ninja hounds, were renowned throughout the shinobi world, useful for their heightened senses and abilities, and as such were able to work with ninja. Solely owned by the Inuzuka clan, they quickly became tools held in high demand and were sold to clans and ninja alike for a high price. Down through the centuries, the tradition continued each day, even in present times, with many ninja of the shinobi world purchasing ninja hounds from the Inuzuka clan. One long-standing tradition consisted of the Hatake clan being a mutual buyer. Pakin was the first dog that Kakashi owned shortly after his induction to Anbu. Over the years before his death, he built up his team of hounds, raising them since their puppy stages and training them each for his own purposes. Bull was the final dog Kakashi added to his team and also was the youngest. He had been the runt of his many siblings and was abused by his breeder, who had crushed the throat of the young pup before going on the run. Bastard had gotten away. For now anyways. Ipiki Inuzuka. His days were numbered. Bull had barely survived but had pulled through. But his voice box was damaged beyond repair, resulting him not being able to talk like the others. Not that many ninja hounds developed the ability to talk anyway. It already required complex movement of the mouth and tongue to speak human language, and some didn't have the ability to make their mouths form suitable words. Under his tutelage, Naruto had signed the summoning contract and with his death became the new master for the group. Kami rest his soul. He has a damaged voice box. He smiled as the big dog marched over to where he was seated and lightly began to pet him. But he doesn't let that stop him. Don't you, boy? Woof! Atta boy. Enjoying the loving care, Bull gave Naruto's hand a lick before he trudged off to a corner of the room, easing himself into a large doggy bed that read Bull's bed in large letters. Pakin voice lightly rang out. Pie is burning. Naruto cursed under his breath before he abruptly vanished, appearing in front of the oven in a flicker of movement, and quickly opened it up, finding the pie he had been baking was slowly beginning to burn at the edges. Grabbing his silly-looking doggy oven mitts, he took the hot pie out of the oven and placed it on the table. Well, who wants pie? Placing his mitts on the counter, he opened a nearby drawer, taking out a small knife. Waiting till the three Genins seated themselves at the table, he expertly began to cut the pie into pieces, his hand moving in a blur. They were no doubt impressed by his display of speed. He grinned underneath his mask, enjoying the boost to his ego. Really looking to impress, Naruto flashed over to the cupboards, retrieving 3 small plates, and at the same time opening the drawers and pulling out some forks, and finally appeared in front of the table before the Genin could blink. There was the sound of rushing air as his hands set the table, and to their surprise, generous pieces of pie appeared on their plates. Smirking all the while at their stares, Naruto slowly eased himself into a chair and intertwined his fingers behind his head, looking cool as a cucumber. Dig in, children. This is post-training relief. Not waiting to be told twice, and feeling extremely hungry after their short battle, the trio muttered a small itadakimasu before they took experimental bites. Eyes widening at the taste, they began to take his words to heart. This is the best pie I ever tasted. Konohamaru's words managed to make sense as he stuffed pie into his mouth, his eyes watering from the taste. Swallowing heavily, he took a momentary pause, glancing at his sensei with stars in his eyes. This is so good. His other teammates had to agree. Though not stuffing their faces as he had, they took their time savoring the taste of the baked dish. Sakura let out an audible moan as the warm treat melted in her mouth, feeling her taste buds explode with flavor. The Uchiha of the team had his eyes closed and was slowly taking his time eating, close to bliss by the taste of the treat. Sasuke would admit he wasn't much of sweet tooth, but he could imagine himself living out the rest of his days on nothing but this pie. Speaking of pies, he had to know the name. Sensei, what kind of pie is this anyway? Having been watching their reactions to his pie, Naruto smiled to himself at yet another satisfied customers. Even though that bad boy was burnt at the edges. Who knew that an S-rank killing machine could make such damn good pies? Leaning towards the table, waggling an index finger beckoning them closer, Naruto whispered dramatically to their ears. Gather round, children. Do you really want to know the name of the super awesome pie that you're currently eating, that makes your taste buds just burst at its sweet taste? Receiving nods, he continued. Well, my stupid little Genin, the name of the pie. He waited till they were straining to hear, almost tipping over their chairs. The name of the pie is a secret. A round of sweat drops came from the Genin as their sensei resumed his previous position, the shift of his mask showcasing his big grin. They frowned at being led on but immediately lost their expressions as they continued eating. Stretching an arm forward and grabbing 2 pieces of pie, Naruto threw one in Bull's direction, and the large dog simply opened his mouth to receive the pie before returning to his nap. Naruto tossed the other to Pakin, who jumped in the air to catch it before landing on the coffee table, resuming his watch of Dogs Gone Wild. Sensei, how come you're not eating? Konohamaru questioned, seeing the Jounin just sit there with his eye closed. Ma, I'm not hungry. He replied, shrugging his shoulders. His nose twitched as he caught the scent of flowers. Well, not for food anyway. Confused at his words, any questions were halted as the sound of keys turning drew everyone's attention to the front door, and were greeted to the sight of blue flip-flops. What nearly made the boys choke on their food was the long creamy legs that those sandals belonged to that stepped in the house. Smoothing the wrinkles out of her short blue summer dress, Riha shut the door behind her before turning around and pausing at the sight of 2 red faces and another of barely concealed jealousy. Taking off her yellow sun hat and adjusting the shopping bag she held in one arm, Riha smiled brilliantly before taking off her sandals and walking towards the group standing beside Naruto. Well, what do we have here? Pulling on Naruto's ponytail, she directed a beautiful smile to the trio. Naruto, how come you never told me your genin were such cuties? Propping an elbow on the table, leaning his cheek on his closed fist, Naruto offered them a dull look. Cuties? I nearly had a heart attack when I first saw them. I mean, how could 3 children look so fugly? Wrapping an arm around her side, Naruto pointed at each of them, ignoring their hostile gazes. See? How do you stand the sight of their faces? They're not just ugly. No. You have to add an F to that. They're fugly. As in frigging ugly. Riha coughed in a fist to conceal her amusement before she slapped a hand to the back of his head. Stop being so rude. Giving a warning look to his glare as he rubbed the back of his head, she offered back the peeved-looking Genin a small smile. Don't mind him. He's just a narcissistic douche. Tucking her sun hat under her arms and ignoring Naruto's shout of "Hey," she extended a hand in greeting. My name is Riha, and it's nice to finally meet you 3. The 3 shook the hand in greeting, blushing all the while at her beautiful smile. Sasuke Uchiha. The dark-haired boy greeted, blushing at the softness of her hand. I'm Sakura Haruno. Sakura greeted eagerly. Wow, you're really pretty. You look kind of familiar though. Are you related to Yamanaka Ino by any chance? Riha smiled at that. Why, yes I am. Her father is my cousin. How is little Ino-chan, by the way? Not wanting to call Ino a pig in front of her, Sakura just grinned nervously. She's fine. Turning eyes to the final member of the group, Konohamaru intertwined her hand in his before pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckle, a cool grin forming on his face. I'm Konohamaru Sarutobi. The Konohamaru Sarutobi. It's an honor to meet such a beautiful flower as yourself, Riha-chan. He wiggled his eyebrows suggestively. Adjusting her hand that held her bags to stiffen her giggles, she smiled at the flirtatious Genin. Goodness me, it's an honor to meet the one and only Konohamaru Sarutobi. Winking suggestively, she gave his hand a squeeze. You're even cuter than I thought, she purred. Concealing the flow of blood from his nose with his scarf, Konohamaru quickly withdrew his hand, his face the same color as the liquid flowing from his nose. Glancing at the pie on the table, she pouted. Naruto-kun. How come you made sugar pie without me? Throwing up his hands in exaggeration, the Jonin shook his head. Thanks a lot, Riha-chan, now they know the name of my secret pie. Hush. Why do you always have to so secretive anyway? Giving him an accusing glare, and she pointed a finger to his face. You wouldn't even show me how to make the pie. I had to beg and give you. Trailing off, she blushed looking at the Genin before she focused back on Naruto, who mistakenly took the opportunity to speak. But you wanted it, and who was I to deny? She silenced him with the look. Mouth snapping shut under his mask, Naruto immediately felt the back of his hair stand up. Oh. Was it that time of the month? The Genin watched in fascination as Naruto paled as a perfectly manicured nail tapped dents into the wood of the table. A scowl marred her beautiful face. It's always, that's a secret, or I'll never tell. She growled, mocking his cheeky one-liners. The trio had to cover their mouths, concealing their humor at her failed imitations. Naruto dared not show his bubbling grin and simply lowered his gaze. A mistake. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Naruto rose his head, pouting. You, don't give me that face. Look who's fugly now. Naruto kissed his teeth, glancing to the side. Your face. He whispered. Why don't talk loud and clear instead of mumbling? She glared down at him, coming directly in his face. Issuing back a challenging look, Naruto punctuated each word in a churlish tone. I said. Your face. Yes, I know my face is beautiful. That's why you can't keep your lips off of it. No, your face is fug. You're frigging ugly. We all know. That's why you wear that mask. She examined her fingernails. The Genin stated in wonder at their sensei getting owned. Naruto bristled. Woman. Don't test me or I'll. You what? She whispered, face inches from his. Discreetly tracing feather-like touches against his head, she leaned towards his ear. Don't forget that time you really got me angry. Wouldn't want your mind in pieces. He shivered at the memory. At the same time, he found himself strangely frightened and turned on at her dangerous threat. Now, Riha-chan. No need to take it that far. Easing to her full height, she smiled sweetly at him, the looming threat dissipating. She gently patted his cheeks before she shoved her shopping bags and hat into his arms and pointed a finger to the hallway that led to the bedroom. Go place my bags inside please. She waved him away. Shoo! Huffing to himself, Naruto slowly eased himself out of his chair, beginning to walk in the direction of the hallway. Someone has her panties in a knot. He muttered on his breath. I'm sorry. I said I'm kinda hot. Naruto shouted from the hallway, disappearing into the master bedroom. All was quiet before a round of laughter burst from the group. Oh man! That was awesome. Can't believe Sensei got owned. Sakura nodded to the young Sarutobi, giggling all the while. Did you see his face? That was hilarious. Sasuke was grinning to himself, silently thinking of ways of using this as leverage for future moments against their lazy sensei. Who knew that this splendorous woman was so dangerous? Staring at the female in question, he felt his Sharingan activate as he took in her laughing form. That summer dress did little to hide her supple curves and the jiggle of her large. Deactivating his Sharingan with a heated blush on his face, Sasuke mentally disciplined himself. Jeez! I can't believe I just did that. Mother would be ashamed. But a growing boy shy of puberty, he couldn't help but admire her lovely form. Clearing his throat, gaining her attention, he nervously adjusted his high collar before he spoke. Excuse me, Riha-san. Are you and Sensei, you know? He gestured with his hands. Riha smiled before she eased herself into the chair recently occupied by Naruto. Crossing her legs and intertwining her fingers under her chin, she raised an eyebrow at him. Sorry Sasuke-kun, but I don't understand the nature of your question. You're going to have to be more specific. Understanding Sasuke's question, Konohamaru continued. Yeah, are you guys buddies? You know, yin and yang. In and out. He grinned. Tongue in leath, Sakura slapped a hand to his mouth, silencing in him. Rolling her eyes at them, she posed the question that the boys were adamantly trying to ask. What my idiot teammates mean is that, are you and Sensei a couple? Lightly blushing at Konohamaru's bold words, she nodded before offering a small smile. Yep. He's my boyfriend. She was unprepared for the excited questions. How'd you two meet? Are the two of you in love? Do you have a sister? Konohamaru-kun. What? I wanna know. Do you want kids? Have you two done the nasty? Konohamaru-kun. Smack. Ouch. Sakura-chan. Have you? Sasuke-kun. Smack. Don't you dare Sharingan glare me. Is Sensei a good kisser? Better yet, what does he look like? The trio shared a glance. Yeah. Is he ugly? No. Is he fugly? Is he super handsome? What does his teeth look like? I bet he has buck teeth. Riha held up her hands to halt the questions, blushing from all the attention to her love life. Okay, one at a time guys. What does he look like? Sasuke immediately questioned. The other two genin nodded their heads in approval. Tapping a finger against her cheek with a thoughtful frown, Riha allowed a smirk to form on her face. I guess I can tease them a bit. Well, despite our little charade of words, he's far from fugly. He's pretty handsome. Sakura let out a shout of, I knew it. His features are sharp. Drop dead sexy. Strong jaw with high cheeks. Oh yes, those cheeks of his are adorable. Best features would have to be his gaze. She seemed to have a faraway look in her as a heated blush came to her face. His gaze would drop any woman. Is he a good kisser? Sakura questioned, stars in her eyes. Now that my dear Sakura-chan is a secret. She let out a perverted giggle that made the boys blush. You see that, boys? Naruto's voice came from behind her. When I say it, I'm secretive jerk. But when she does it, it's a-okay. Walking to stand beside her, he shoved his hands into his pockets, speaking dryly. You can write books on them. Study them for 100 years and still never understand the way the female mind works. It's just one of life's great mysteries that man will never solve. Absorbing the words of wisdom, the young males saw Riha smile sheepishly before she wrapped her fingers around Naruto's gloved hand and brought it up to her lips. Ah, I'm sorry Naruto-kun. You know I never meant it. She offered sincerely. Grunting, Naruto pried his hand from hers, beginning to walk to the door. My hands are immune to that now. Slipping on his sandals and adjusting the sword on his back, Naruto regarded the group with his lone eye. I have a meeting to attend. Be back whenever. Closing the door, he offered a wave. Later. Riha pouted before she miserably took a large piece of pie. She began stuffing her face, frowning to herself. Never even gave me a goodbye kiss. She spoke with a mouth full of food. What a jerk. Nah. He's just peeved he has to go to meeting of all times. Riha looked up in surprise at the familiar voice before she smiled up at the pug that had appeared on top of her head. Pakin. To the secret jealousy of the boys, the small pug was crushed in between her chest, all the while the small pug relishing in her scent of flowers. You were here this whole time. Yeah, sorry I was too busy watching TV. You wouldn't imagine the dogs out there. Making himself comfortable, Pakin shifted so he could effectively sit in her lap with his direction towards the table. Eyeing the piece of pie in her hand hungrily, Pakin licked his lips before grinning up at her. Riha-chan, you mind sharing? Offering her pie, the Pakin immediately took it between his paws and stuffed his face full. Dropping his head back, he let out a howl of utter satisfaction. Oh, how I love me some good sugar pie. Giving a small smile at the pug over the top of his head, she began to scratch under his chin to his enjoyment. How are the rest of the boys? Taking time to chew his food, he spoke in between gulps. Not bad. Bull, over there is a pussycat as always. Glancing to the living room, she saw the large dog in reference fast asleep in his doggy bed with his feet dangling in the air. It was comical to see his legs give the occasional twitch. Feeling 3 set of eyes on him, Pakin glanced up curiously, meeting the eyes of Genin. After a minute of staring, he grunted. What? Still not used to the sight of a talking dog no less eating pie, Sasuke was the first one to speak. How are you able to speak anyways? Finishing his pie and licking his lips clean, Pakin grunted again, using Riha as a makeshift pillow. Well, how are human babies able to speak? They learn to communicate by listening and watching the humans around them. Scratching behind his ear, he continued. In the first few months you hear babbles and sounds. Well, for us in 2 months we're usually able to form and articulate words. But you're a dog, stated Sakura. It shouldn't be possible. Sighing, he cupped a paw to his face. Look at this way, we're bred to be able to fit certain functions and tasks. Some of us trained to speak since birth, others trained in elemental nature types, and so on. Wait, there's more of you. Konohamaru's interrupted, sharing a glance with Riha that caused her to giggle. Pakin sighed. Yes, there's 8 of us in total that are partners with Naruto. Bull, myself, Urushi, Shiba, Baisuke, Akino, Uhei, and Giroku. We're all been raised and trained by Kakashi first before, he trailed off, lowering his head. A sad look came over his face. Before what? Sasuke questioned. Pakin raised his head, a frown marring his face. Before he died. He finished, his voice blank. Sakura's eyes softened. It must have been hard on your pack. Pakin nodded grimly. Kakashi handpicked all of us during his Umbu years. I was the first one of the pack. The pug suddenly began to rub his eyes, grunting. Damn, who left onions around the place? An awkward silence enveloped the apartment room. The only sound was Bull's loud snores. Hating the silence, Konohamaru cleared his throat. So Pakin-san, mind explaining the talking in more detail? I mean, knowing that most animals don't have mouths suitable for forming words, and not to mention the complexity of human speech, it's kinda hard to believe. Pakin stared at him for a moment before he chuckled. You're smarter than you look. Konohamaru took it as a compliment. Yes, usually human speech requires complex movements of the tongue that animals simply can't do. But as I mentioned before, we're trained from birth. Like you humans are trained to read and write and whatever else you do, we're trained to access chakra and speak and do whatever is needed to develop abilities useful to shinobi. Tired of all the talking, the pug stretched before he let out a loud yawn. Well, children, Riha-chan, I'd love to stay and explain the wonders of summons, but we really must be going. Riha had stayed quiet through the questioning, pouted, gaining their attention. You're leaving already? Don't you want to stay longer? Pakin glanced up to her baby blues and smirked to himself. Nah, I'm good. Leaping off of her, his little feet carried him to the sleeping bull before he jumped on the large dog's stomach. Giving a small wave, he bid goodbye. Ciao. Both dogs disappeared in a puff of smoke. Glancing to the disappearing smoke, the members of Team 7 brainstormed over the benefits of having their own summons. I want my own set of talking dogs, Sasuke stated. Sakura agreed, nodding enthusiastically. Hell yeah, I would want my own chihuahua. She finished, cupping her face. Konohamaru meanwhile was deep in thought. Eyes widening, he cursed out loud, gaining everyone's attention. Those damn monkeys. They're such liars. Naruto slowly made his way up to the conference room, already suspicious of the incoming talk. This was supposed to be a meeting for the Jonin Sensei. Years of experience taught him that if it was in the conference room, whatever it was nothing good. Arriving at the door, the Umbu guards saluted to him before allowing him access. Opening the door for him, he walked in to see all the assembled Jonin Sensei and some military police. The room was packed. What caught his attention was that they circled the room in a half-circle surrounding the assembled Jonin. All eyes turned toward him as he walked in the room. "Ma, sorry if I'm late. Got attacked by a group of kids and had to run from the little buggers." Rolling his eyes, the Hokage drummed his fingers against the desk he was seated in, flanked by Danzu to his right and Hamura to his left. "Your tardiness surpasses Kakashi's. Now if you please, Naruto, come in so we can get this meeting started." Smiling sheepishly, he made his way to the front, passing groups of Jounin. What caught his attention was that pillows were laid out on the floor. It would seem that this was going to be a long talk. Kurenai flashed him a small smile as he stood beside her, and he nodded to Asuma and Guy, who returned the nod in greeting. Nothing else was said as they all turned their full attention to the table. "Please sit." As one, they all seated themselves on the pillows. The sound of the door locking was heard and security seals briefly glowed across the room. All sound to the outside world was cut off as the room fell into complete silence. No one would be able to leave or enter. Lighting his pipe, the Hokage shifted in his seat before holding out his hand to Hamura. Immediately an envelope was put into his hands and was swiftly opened. Glancing at the documents in front of him, the Hokage blew out a puff of smoke before frowning. "It has been a little over a month since the new teams were set in rotation. You have all already sent me your statistics of each genin on your teams." Blank eyes focused on the group of ninja. "What I say not only regards the new teams, but the entire rotation of teams. These stats are beyond pathetic." The Jounin shifted in their seats, mumbles erupting in volume. Guy immediately spoke out. "Excuse me, Hokage-sama." Receiving a nod, he continued. "I don't speak for my fellow comrades, but I can say without a doubt, not questioning your judgment, there must be a mistake. I've had my team for 1 year now and I have steadily improved them since day one. Surely your team was one of the most embarrassing cases." Danzu's voice cut him off. 1 year and not even one of your students have at least one elemental jutsu. I beg your pardon, honored elder. But I train my students to be a team specializing in close combat. Taijutsu. I have not taught them any elemental jutsu because frankly they don't need them. They already. Regardless of specialization, a genin needs to be well-rounded in all aspects of a soldier of Konoha. What good is taijutsu against a strong ninjutsu user? He made a fair point, but seeing someone like Guy, who was an unrivaled taijutsu master, had defeated plenty of shinobi regardless of their ninjutsu. Forgive me, honored elder, but that is a rather insulting question. Both taijutsu and ninjut. Soldiers need focus on all aspects of the shinobi. He rudely cut him off. Focusing his single eye on him, he frowned. Perhaps your team wouldn't be so pathetic if you weren't so focused on that worthless excuse of a shinobi, Rock Lee. The assembled Jounin wearily looked at Guy. Knowing the special case of Lee and the love Guy had for his mini-clone, insulting him was the equivalent of insulting the man himself. "Beg your pardon." Guy seethed. "There is no need to insult one of my students, Danzu-sama. The boy was born with an underdeveloped chakra network. I have trained him to." "Enough." The room became silent as the Hokage's voice rang out. Guy frowned at being cut off yet again, but respectfully kept it to himself. "After careful deliberation between myself and my colleagues, we have come to a conclusion that a test must be held." Meeting every single eye in the room, his voice was cold. "This generation has been babied for far too long. In times of peace they were allowed their childhood. But now they are soldiers and as such needed to be reminded that the life of the shinobi is no game." He folded his arms across his chest, closing his eyes. Kunoichi in training, more obsessed with boys and their looks than their already pathetic ninja skills. Clan children receiving special treatment. Boys taking the life of a shinobi as a competition. Utterly disgusting. Opening his eyes, he fixed the amassed ninja with a cold look. "These children are our future. They are Konoha's future. As the Hokage of Konoha, I cannot allow our future to be jeopardized. As such, I, the third Hokage of Konoha, granted by the powers of the Fire Daimyo himself, hereby authorize the SD for this genin rotation. The room erupted into pandemonium. Hokage-sama! They're just kids. You can't be serious. I as a Jonin Sensei have the rights to refuse. You will destroy them. The military police surrounding the amassed ninja went into action trying to control the Jonin that were now all standing on their feet. Please calm down. Order. Order. Stay seated. The silent dispatch was something used after Third World War. Devised by the Dark Shinobi himself and finalized by the 4th Hokage under pressure from council, it was Konoha's effective license to kill in the name of national security. In the recent years there had been many uprisings against Konoha and the fire daimyo across the country. Mobs of civilians rioting over mentions of a one true king and threats against Konoha. Seeing the danger of having his own citizens rise up against the country, the Fire Lord granted the powers to kill citizens that were deemed traitors. With such powers, Konoha became immune to international law if the killings were ever leaked. The targets were usually small villages around the country where a strong presence of uprising was dealt with permanently. It wasn't all-out genocide. It was about sending a message. It was treason for citizens of the country to go against the village. Konoha was the law. It was effective method true to its name. All those accused were silently dispatched. The message was clear. Obey or simply die. It was Konoha showing its dark side. Its hidden roots that were twisted in darkness. No mercy was ever shown. Be it men, women or even children, they would be made an example out of. Survivors would be issued strict gag orders and monitored so the dark deeds would never be exposed to the light. True to the name, Umbu were the ones that usually dealt with the threat. At times the occasional group of Jounin would be sent. Rarely were the chances of a Chunin sent for the job. Never in the village history had that order been issued to Genin. The Hokage was serious. Try as they may, the military police were outnumbered and couldn't calm the angry Jounin. A full riot was about to break out before an overbearing presence filled the room. The ceiling cracked, the doors began to creak, the very wood of the desk the officials were seated split in half under the overbearing weight of powerful chakra. The amassed ninja froze stiff as a massive chakra spike filled the room. Slowly they turned to the seated Hokage, who had a faint glow around him. The god of shinobi lowered his hat over his eyes and slowly the overbearing weight disappeared. The group of shinobi let out a breath they had been holding and slowly seated themselves back on their pillows. Since the very beginning Naruto had stayed still, not reacting in the slightest to the news. All was quiet as the Hokage moved his pipe to his lips. Blowing out another puff of smoke, his cold eyes drifted over the group. Have you all calmed yourselves? When no one answered he repeated, his eyes growing hard. I said, have you all calmed yourselves? A chorus of, yes Hokage-sama, answered his question. Good. With a snap of his fingers the lights in the room darkened, and on the far right of the room, to the left of the Hokage, and the right of the seated Jounin, a projector turned on and began to show a large map of Fire Country. Showcasing the country's vast geography, the entire area was highlighted, showing all the cities and small villages of Fire Country. One point in particular was highlighted in red. To the far east laid the Black River. A large importer of salmon coming from river country. To the south, the Black River had a small village that specialized in importing and delivering salmon to the large population of the country. As you can see, Black River has become an upriser to the Fire Lord and Konohagakure. Spies have shown that they have purposely been poisoning fish they import into the country and selling it to Konoha at alluring cheap prices. They have become a threat to national security and therefore must be dealt with. Hamura, who had been quiet through this whole ordeal, finally spoke. As much power that we're granted, we are still limited to a certain number of deaths. Regardless, it would be more than sufficient in sending a message. Genin will be tasked with specific targets. The Jonin Sensei felt the feeling of dread begin to rise in their stomachs. Leaders and organizers will be priority targets. Danza began. His voice turned to stone. Their families must also share the same fate. The projector turned off and the lights in the room flickered on. The room was enveloped into dead silence. Faces lost their color. Some stared wide-eyed in shock with disbelief at what they were just told. Kurenai stood up abruptly, shocking those around her. Mentally preparing in thought, her red eyes locked gazes with the Hokage. Hokage-sama. I, Kurenai Yuhi, under Article S7-11 of Konoha Law, issue my right as a Jounin Sensei to refuse the subjugation of my Genin to the SD. Article S7-11 of Konoha Law. Jonin Sensei have the right to take all feasible measures to ensure that genin who have not attained the equivalent mental capacity and or skill set do not take a direct path in hostilities deemed harsh. Disregard to S7-11 is a direct violation to the Convention of Rights of Genin under Sector 6 Paragraph 11. Note, all laws are momentarily suspended during times of war or conflict under Sector 1 of the War Act. The Charter of Konoha. The amassed Jounin let out mumbles and whispers. It was gutsy move using the law against the Hokage. Danzo was quick to silence them. Yuhi. I thought you of all people would understand the failure that this generation of shinobi are. Show some spine. Kurenai was about to fire back a reply before Naruto interrupted her. You're right, he started. This generation is the weakest that Konoha has had in years. I mean no, all of what Hokage-sama was saying is true. But, I will admit they have a lot of potential. And I do mean a lot of potential. I dare say we have some select few that can even put you to shame, Danzo-sama. He hid his grin at the elder's frown. Issuing this test will utterly destroy them. In their eyes they would be killing innocents. Maybe they're too young to fully understand what it means to be a shinobi, or they're simply not cut out for the job, but as for right now they're not ready. The least you can do is give us more time. Danzo scoffed before fixing him a penetrating glare. You would only be delaying the inevitable. Your compassion is a weakness that will lead to downfall. Your father is prime example. The room went deathly silent. Naruto slowly tilted his head, his lone eye narrowed to slits. His Sharingan burned. On instinct his chakra spiked, causing those around him to flinch. Exhaling through his nose he fixed Danzo with a glare of his own. Don't talk about my father like you know him, old man. I know your diapers are soiled from missing the Hokage seat yet again, but no need to be jealous. Danzo shook with barely concealed rage before he expertly concealed his emotions. Yes, Minato was a great Hokage, wasn't he? Said to be the greatest Konoha ever had. His voice was smug. Funny how his reign was the shortest. At least he became the Hokage. How old was Dad? Ah yes, he did in 20 years what you're. Hold up. A pause. How old are you, Hokage-sama? 73. Naruto gasped dramatically. Oh shit. In 20 years he accomplished what your 73-year-old ass could not. Hot damn, and the funniest thing is you're still trying. Don't worry though, by the time you're 100 I'm sure they would be willing to give you the hat. Silence. Despite the situation a snicker rang out. A few more laughs echoed before full giggles were heard. Danzo sat rigid still. That boy had just embarrassed in front of all the Jounin and Hiruzen. He itched to wipe the smirk the brat was hiding under that mask of his, but for now he showed restraint. Patience, he echoed in his mind. I must have patience. His exposed eye regarded Naruto seriously before his lips curved into a cruel smirk. If there was thing Danzo made sure of, was that he would always have the last laugh. Yes, what a laugh it would be. His agent was in deep. The Hokage had watched the tussle between the two and slowly smirked. Well then, if that's out of the way, Naruto. At his name the Jounin glanced to the Hokage. Sir, what do you think of the will of fire? Out of curiosity, the will of fire? Naruto echoed with a lazy look in his eye. Isn't that the belief that peace is the way or some shit like that? The Hokage nodded. Fuck that shit. Ignoring shocked gasps around he continued. I'm a soldier, first and foremost. I murder, steal, lie and do whatever it is that Konoha requires of me. But the end of the day I have my own ideals and beliefs. And the will of fire sure as hell isn't one of them, Hokage-sama. The Hokage smiled to himself and strange glint appeared in his eye. Nodding he puffed on his pipe. Now what is you were saying about more time? Feel free to add your opinion. He added, gladly. Though these rising protesters are a problem, I believe that this is nothing more than a way of ensuring control through death and fear. In the eyes of Genin fresh out the academy this would go against everything they were taught in their time training to graduate. Naruto shrugged. Doesn't this village spend, I don't know, billions on academy budgets? It would be a huge waste to me to have your very own Genin hate their own village. Just saying. He finished pulling out his familiar orange book. He cast a wink to Kurenai, who smiled at him before sitting down. It was interesting to see Homura's face turn purple. Standing hard enough to knock his chair over, he bellowed at the bored-looking blonde, shouting obscenities. Hokage-sama! Do you not hear this treason? The will of fire is fundamental philosophy of this village. Officers, arrest him. Send him to be quiet. Hamaru snapped his eyes to the Hokage. Hiruzen! Surely you cannot allow this boy to. His jaw snapped shut at the look he received. Setting his chair straight, he smoothed out the creases on his robe and sat as if he hadn't just looked like he would pop a blood vessel. Ideology and beliefs are different to each ninja, my friend. To each his own. The third added more tobacco to his pipe before he placed it against his lips. He waited before cutting sharp eyes to Hamura on his left. Looking like he tasted something sour, Hamura produced a match from his sleeve and lit the Hokage's pipe. Taking a deep puff of the pipe, the third exhaled loudly. In the airtight room, the scent of tobacco was strong, but the amassed shinobi had smelled worse. Much worse. Well said, Naruto. I see that silver tongue of yours is always carefully concealed by that mass of tardiness. I try, Hokage-sama. I try. Amused glances turned his way, but I regrettably inform you that the will of the fire daimyo is above the law. You cannot refuse. He said, locking gazes with Kurenai. Rubbing his chin, he glanced down at the document he had wanted to read since the beginning of this way-to-long meeting. He was about to get cranky. Now, as I was about to say before your interruptions. If your team is not called, then your genin will not be inducted. If you are, you will have 1 week to prepare them. Be it mentally or physically. I hope that is sufficient, Naruto. Naruto flipped a page in his book. Beggars can't be choosers, Hokage-sama. Laughing, the third chuckled to himself before taking another puff of his pipe. Indeed. Hiruzen fired back. Now as for the teams. Jonin Sensei, please listen for your numbers. Sitting upright, they all listened closely. Team 7, he began first, purposely cutting eyes to the Jonin. Naruto, who had his face stuck in his book, directed a lazy gaze over the cover. Sorry, you say something? His eyes narrowed at him, but Naruto returned the gaze with lazy indifference. Shaking his head, he continued. Team 8. The female Jounin's only response was the tightening of her jaw. Team 8. Kurenai glared. Team 10. Asuma sat stone-faced, smoking his cigarette. Team 12. There was the sound of knuckles cracking, and Aoba Yamashiro cursed under his breath. Team Guy. It was unnerving to see Guy so quiet. The man hadn't moved an inch since his debate with Danzu. Team 13. Someone let out a helpless sigh. Team 14. A resounding "fuck" was heard. And finally, Team 15. This bandana-wearing Jounin had a good poker face. That is all the teams that are issued SD. As for teams that were not called, I hope you use this as opportunity to improve your genin to sufficient standards. Without a doubt you all need it. Rising swiftly from his seat, flanked by Hamura and Danzu, his voice echoed through the quiet room. This meeting is adjourned. At the sound of his voice, the seals across the room glowed and the sound of the outside world filtered back in. The wide doors at the back opened as the Hokage and officials left the room. The military police soon followed, marching out, leaving the Jounin to themselves. And like a switch, the Jounin jumped to their feet, beginning to argue. Our kids can't handle this. We should protest. Better yet, we should go on strike. What is Hokage-sama thinking? Taking time to slowly rise himself to his feet, Naruto stretched languidly before trying to make an exit amid the chaos. But before he could think of taking a step, his gloved hand was held fast. Looking at perfectly manicured nails holding his wrist, his gaze traveled upwards to the exotic red eyes of Kurenai. And where do you think you're going? Home. No, you're not. And why, Ms. Yuhi, can I not go to my own home? Because we're debriefing. Can't that wait to tomorrow? Kurenai didn't answer him. Sighing to himself, Naruto allowed himself to be led to the makeshift circle. They consisted of Guy, Asuma, Aoba, and a few other Jonin Sensei of the teams that had been called. Being the only female team leader there, Kurenai took the initiative to speak. We need to plan when and where to have our kids go accordingly. She crossed her arms under her bountiful bust. Who has the names of the targets? Aoba retrieved a document from his utility pouch. Here are the names. We have 8 different targets. The largest being a family of 5. Next there is the village leader by the name of Furito Tsuyoshi. Adjusting his dark glasses atop of his nose, he frowned. He's said to be the key organizer of these uprisings. Asuma shifted his cigarette around his mouth. What's his background? Any shinobi history, or is he just a plain civilian? Flipping through the documents papers, Aoba nodded. Where is it? Here he is. Furito Tsuyoshi. Born August 30, 1975 A.S. After Sage, he is a 35-year-old engineer who had graduated from Fire Country University and moved to Black River in 1990. There he became a village advisor and soon rose to the village leader in 1996. Physical stats? Kurenai questioned. Aoba flipped another page. It says here he's 5 feet 9 inches, around 160 pounds. Strong build. Any family? A dark-haired Jonin asked. Shaking his head, he frowned. Says here he had a wife and son, but both died during the Third Shinobi War. Guy finally took the time to speak. This situation is most unyouthful. Naruto nodded in silent agreement. They still had to go over the other families and plan accordingly. This was going to be a long night. Glancing around, he saw that the other Jounin who hadn't had their teams called surrounded them, listening quietly. Asuma crossed his arms. One team should take him out first and the rest pick off the others. Kurenai turned her red eyes to him. And if our kids can't take the lives of a civilian, then they fail and are debarred from ever entering the shinobi forces. Naruto replied. Sighing, he turned a tired eye to Kurenai. I know how you feel, Kurenai-chan. Trust me. But this is nothing new. I've been sent to do jobs like this so much in the past I lost count. Kurenai's fingers tightened to fist. Well, my kids are nothing like you. They have their own problems and you know nothing about them. I have this one student that would absolutely be destroyed by this. Failure for her would mean her enslavement. Then she's not cut out for the life of a shinobi. Naruto's voice was cold. This is what SD is all about. Whether or not you can go against everything you believe in. Can you obey without question? Kill innocents for the sake of Konoha? If not, then that Hyuga of yours is going to become another branch servant. Kurenai snarled and looked like she about to attack before Naruto laid a calming hand on her shoulder. Kurenai. Naruto began. I know that you've just recently became a Jonin Sensei, so your reaction to this is understandable. But most of what the Hokage was saying is true. These kids have been babied. And it's time to show them world. She slowly lost her angry gaze before she nodded in resignation. Giving her shoulder a friendly pat, Naruto gave her a nice smile before turning to the faces around him. Now people, we have a long night of planning ahead. Any doubts on your team will only make this long night that much more unbearable. If any of you don't think your team is cut out for this, then leave. No one moved. Good. Then let's get this over with so we can use our already limited time to go prepare our teams. Like a knife going through butter, Naruto's calm voice cut the thick tension in the room. Shoulders lost their tense posture and some even let out breaths they didn't know they had been holding. Seeing the opportunity, Guy wrapped his arms around Naruto, crying tears. Oh, my eternal rival. Your flames of youth burn ever bright, lighting the way like a beacon through this dark time. Rolling his single eye at the man's eccentric nature, he sighed. Alright, Guy, you can let me go now. Grinning, Asuma cast a smug glance to the two. You know, Naruto, you'd make a fine Hokage someday. Why not get the old man to retire? Before he had a chance to reply, Kurenai echoed her approval. Yeah, Naruto, doesn't the third want you to be his successor? Rather serve you than him. Haha, that's what she said. Who said that? Kurenai shouted, her face glowing red. Her fiery red eyes searched the crowd, but no one dared to meet her gaze. Still, in Guy's manhug, Naruto had to be cheeky. Oh, my dear sweet Kurenai-chan. I would make it a law for you to be my personal assistant. Face red with embarrassment, she glared at him. Don't you have a girlfriend, Naruto? Yes, but a man can dream, can't he? Pig. She accused. Takes one to know one. He shifted his gaze to Asuma. Right, Sarutobi? Asuma smirked before attempting to put an arm around her, but let out a hiss at the elbow he received. A quiet set of chuckles was heard. Naruto grinned at Kurenai's blushing face before he stopped and turned his single eye to Guy. Seriously, Guy? Put me down now. So, Naruto-sensei, he was still getting used to that. What are we doing at Black River? Sasuke questioned, turning his curious gaze to him. Don't tell me we have to watch another execution. Konohamaru shivered. That snake lady was apeshit crazy. Sakura nodded, looking a little pale. Yeah, sensei, I mean that was brutal. And she had the nerve to offer us if we wanted a try. She mocked, failing to copy Enko's voice. Naruto frowned. There were severe punishments in telling Genin about SD. They would have to go in blind, seeing how they would react or go against orders. In the week that they had, Naruto tried all he could to get them some experience. His first move had been bringing them to the underground of the Konoha's interrogation department to witness live executions and interrogations. Just his luck, Enko had been busy at work. He had made them watch, telling them it was a test and if they looked away they would fail. Enko had even offered them to participate. He was hoping they would, but they all refused. Going for more hands-on experience, he took them on a few C-class missions that purposely encountered bandits. They were ordered to not leave any survivors. They had killed, but did so reluctantly. Sasuke and Konohamaru did as they were ordered, but Sakura was the one who had struggled. Coming from a civilian family, she was entirely new to the life of a shinobi. The boys came from major shinobi clans and were accustomed to the harsh life. They had their own experiences with death. Sasuke witnessed the slaughter of his clan, and from what he had read from Konohamaru's file, the boy was only 2 years old and witnessed his mother killed in the Kyubi attack. He had a father, but the last time anyone heard of him was when he ventured to the land of his monkey summons. But just because they had witnessed death didn't mean they could willfully take a life. Sakura was worse, struggling to make a kill. Sasuke had done it for her. He just hoped that they would pull through. This was the first team he had ever passed, and though he would never admit it, he cared for the little buggers. They were officially past the 2-month mark, and to have them just taken away from him made his heart ache. He cared more for his comrades than the village itself. Not that he would stand by and let Konoha be destroyed if meant none of his friends were in it. No, he just didn't believe in the ideals of the will of fire. His harshest truth was, "Sensei." Sasuke's voice halted his thoughts. "You didn't answer my question." Glancing around, he could see that they were at their destination. A large sign read, Black River. Population, 300. It was a relatively small-size village, about 5 kilometers in circumference. True to its name, Black River ran through the village center in a straight line. From the rushing waters of river country, the village used water power to their advantage for clean hydroelectricity. Surrounding the village was tall pine trees on each side. There were no walls to guard the village and no threat of danger, as it was relatively close to Konoha. Glancing up to the trees around the village, he could sense the carefully hidden chakra signatures. A heavy Umbu presence watching and waiting to run crowd control. Clearing his throat, he gained their attention from their sightseeing. He was about to speak but trailed off as his mouth seemed to have locked. Gazing from one curious eye to the next that still held faces of innocence, something inside of him screamed to just call this off. If they succeeded after today, things would be different. Forever. His sense of morality wanted for him to so badly say they were walking into a trap. But his rationality kicked in and his face became blank. He was a shinobi. Morality was something for a samurai. Konohamaru Sarutobi. Sasuke Uchiha. Sakura Haruno. You are now officially under Konoha Silent Dispatch. Under the will of the Fire Daimyo and authorization from the 3rd Hokage, you are given the momentary powers of a license to kill. You are instructed to find and terminate specific targets to the uprising of the One King protesters. Their faces were confused at the beginning of his statement and slowly paled at the end. That's why their sensei was so quiet. That whole week of witnessing tortures and killing bandits all made sense now. Before they could voice their questions, Naruto continued, you are instructed to kill. Here are your individual targets. He handed each a paper with a picture of a face. Failure to do so will result in an immediate failure and debarment from Konoha's shinobi forces. You have 2 hours to find and kill your targets. I'm instructed to not answer any questions. The genin stared. Sakura's face was snow white. This must be a joke. Why you must be joking, sensei. Please tell me this is all one big joke. Naruto's face didn't change. You have 2 minutes to step inside the village or you fail automatically. Konohamaru held the papers in his shaking hands. But, this is a civilian village. Are you asking us to kill innocents? You have 1 minute and 50 seconds. Sensei, please. Konohamaru begged. At least tell us what we're walking into. He finished with a whisper. I can't. Chapter 6, The Test Part 2. I can't. Sasuke growled at his response, the red of his Sharingan glowing with rage. Bullshit, Naruto sighed tiredly. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds, Konohamaru glared. So that's it? You're just going to let us leap into the unknown? He snarled when Naruto didn't reply. Answer me, sensei. Slowly shaking his head he replied. The village wants. Fuck the village. Who cares about them right now? It's about us. Naruto was about to respond before his eye momentarily widened. The image of a young boy filtered across his mind. He was angry. He didn't care about nothing. After losing all he cared about, living in this world had no meaning. No purpose. Fuck the village. Fuck the elders. Fuck the old man. Fuck them all. All around him trash littered the floor. The empty apartment he was in was a mess. Empty bottles surrounded him, mixed with vomit, the result of an 8-year-old drinking. He held a kunai to his throat in his shaking hands. His cold blue eyes looked up at the man watching him with an indifferent gaze. Aren't you going to try and stop me? He snapped. The man shrugged. Nope. You're nothing but a coward. So go ahead and do it. I'll tell the police that you slipped. Naruto growled at him. You don't understand, Kakashi. I lost everything. The man shrugged again. Your point. Big whoop, you lost your parents, and blah, blah. Shit happens. Wipe your ass and grow up. Snarling like an animal he charged the man. Fuck the village. His kunai struck. Sensei. The shout brought him back to reality. Each face stared up at him, a range of emotions crossing their faces. Kakashi-sensei, I can't do it. Try as he may, he couldn't stop the flow of tears coming from his eyes. Through his tears he stared down at the weeping man gagged with ropes, eyes pleading for mercy. The sword in his hand rattled from his shaking hands. You don't have a choice, Naruto. The sound of a sword being drawn made his eyes snap to the man. Raw killing intent rolled off of him in waves. It's either he dies. Or you do. His Sharingan glowed in the darkness. Choose. Choose. He made his choice. Naruto ran a hand through his hair. Glancing up to the trees he shook his head. Fuck it, I might get court-martialed for this, but as you said, Konohamaru, fuck the village. He stooped down to their eye level, meeting each of their gazes. Before he could speak, an Umbu appeared. Naruto Namikaze, you are in direct violation. He stopped dead as he was hit with a massive killing intent. Before he could utter another sentence, the hard handle of a sword knocked him on his face. The shadow clone waved at the shocked trio before picking up the unconscious man and disappearing into the forest. Turning back to his surprised team he spoke. Listen closely, guys, I only have a minute to speak. Meeting each pair of eyes he spoke. You're being asked to kill civilians, maybe innocents, in the name of Konoha. I know how you guys are feeling right now, believe me. But you have to do this if you want to stay on this team. He paused. You do want to stay on this team, right? They nodded slowly. Good. The higher-ups believe your generation is not ready for the life of a shinobi. This is a test to see whether or not you have what it takes to obey and go against everything you have been taught. But sensei. Sakura began, we were taught. Do you think they give a fuck what you were taught? Naruto snapped. Seeing her flinch he breathed deeply, lowering his voice. Listen. Just do it, okay? Please. His voice was practically begging. I will be watching, but I can't interfere. If you see other teams, you are not to interact them. Neither your teammates. Wait, there are others? Sasuke questioned, his eyes wide. Naruto nodded. Yes, mainly the rookie 9. No, go. Pushing each of them forward, they gave him one last look before venturing inside the village. Running a hand through his hair he breathed deeply, trying to calm his racing heart. Giving a look to their disappearing backs he disappeared with a burst of wind. In the center of the village sat a mid-sized administration village that housed the office of the village leader. Inside a small office filled with many antiques and collections of paintings sat Furito Tsuyoshi, smiling as he stood by the window watching the many inhabitants of Black River. He absently stroked his long white hair as he smirked to himself. Everything was going as expected. Despite Konohagakura's best efforts, word got out about the village killing off citizens of the One King protesters. A protest he himself had started, just as he had foretold Konoha would send its dogs running to the source. He had explained to a select few that Konoha would be looking to kill, and they had planned accordingly. 3 figures stood behind him, their faces patiently awaiting their master's orders. Fudo, a large man, crossed his arms over his chest and scratched his wild hair. The other member of the trio absently ran a hand through her glossy black hair. Fuin let a smirk cross her beautiful features, already relishing in the chance to fight some Konoha-nin. The last member of the team licked her lips, sensually rubbing her hands along the sides of her body. She couldn't wait to offer her enemies a kiss that they would die for. Their attention focused on the man as he cleared his throat. "It's time. Go and move into position," he ordered. Fudo frowned at his back and awkwardly cleared his throat. Sir?" With his eyes on him, he continued. "Not to seem disrespectful, but what will you be doing?" Kazuma laughed long and hard, his voice causing the trio to step back in fear. "My friend, I will be readying our ace in the hole." He turned back to the window. "These Konoha ninja will never know what hit them," he finished with a dark chuckle. Fuin scoffed. "How is that boy going to fight the—" She stopped dead at his fierce glare, ducking her head in shame. "Do not doubt the power of the Kyubi," he whispered fiercely. "I will break Sora's seal and let him wreak havoc on these fools." He turned his gaze to the window. "Then, he will lead a path of destruction straight to Konoha." He cast a gaze to bodies of the dead Umbu littering his office. "This will be the dawn of new era," he whispered darkly. The 3 teammates all stared hesitantly at each other, eyes moving from one face to another as they awkwardly shuffled their feet. Konohamaru, showing bravery, spoke up first. "Well, I guess we better get going." Sasuke hesitantly nodded. Yeah." Sakura was staring from one face to another before she shivered, gaining their attention. Throwing caution to the wind, she threw her arms around both of them, mashing their faces so close that their cheeks brushed against each other. "Promise me." Her voice was shaken. "And no matter what happens, we'll still be friends." Konohamaru fully wrapped his arms around her. "Of course, Sakura-chan. That's a promise." Sasuke did the same, his face tight with emotion. "I promise." In the few months they had known each other, they had formed an inseparable bond, despite their rough beginnings. Gently bumping heads, she gave both of them a teary smile. "All right. Good luck." They nodded to each other before walking away in separate directions. Sasuke glanced up to house he had stopped at. Scanning through the paper his target held, read, Aiko Noriko. Age 15. Height 5 feet 5 inches. Staring at her picture, he could see she was a beautiful girl. Light brown eyes and dark black hair. She had pretty face with high cheekbones and a small nose. But her files said she wasn't involved. Innocent. Her father was a fierce supporter to the One King protest that she never participated in. Her file read that she didn't even know about the protest. She was usually home alone for most of the day as her single father worked at the Fire Country's capital city. Easing the paper into his pouch, he sighed deeply before he walked up to the front door and knocked. It wasn't long before he heard footsteps and the same face on the picture opened the door. "Oh, hello." Her voice was sweet and calm. Glancing at her, he could see she had on a form-fitting kimono that hid a nice figure. Her lush dark hair was held up into long ponytail. She was a few inches taller than him, so he had to tilt his head to meet her gaze. Despite his rising emotions, he managed to smile. "Good evening. My name is Sasuke Uchiha and I'm from Konohagakure under a routine village checkup." His remembered the lie the paper had instructed them to use, before he gestured to his headband. "May I come in?" She smiled brilliantly at him. "Oh, you're from Konoha? I always wanted to go there. Please come in." She opened the door, allowing him access. He palmed a kunai and stepped in. She locked the door behind him and directed him to a modest living room. Carefully hiding the blade, he seated himself gracefully. "Thank you for inviting me into your home. I know this visit must be unexpected." Sitting from across from beside him, she smiled. "Oh, I don't mind. We rarely see ninja around these parts." There was silence before she tilted her head at him. "So what brings you to this part of Fire Country, Uchiha-san?" "As I mentioned before, routine inspection, and please just call me Sasuke. No need for formalities." Sasuke gestured a hand. "I'm just here for checkups on the little things. For example, has your village been subject to crimes lately?" She shook her head. No, most people are friendly out here. Rarely are there any crimes. Sasuke nodded to himself before his grip tightened on his hidden kunai. What about shinobi presence? Her eyes drifted in thought before she gave a small shrug. I see the occasional Konoha shinobi once or twice, but that's it. Again Sasuke just nodded. He flexed his arm preparing to just slit her throat. But enough of that, I rarely get a chance to talk to a shinobi, and such a cute one for that matter, she stated, suddenly causing his grip to slacken and his mouth to open in shock. She scooted closer to him, and clasped her hands together looking all the more innocent. What's it like to be a shinobi? Is life like the ones we see in the movies? Is it all fame and fortune? She fired off her questions excitedly. Sasuke closed his mouth before he fixed her with a blank glance. Like the movies? He questioned. She nodded excitedly. Listen, she shook her head. Oh goodness me. How rude of me not to introduce myself. She held out a hand to him. I'm Iko Nariko. Shaking his hand she smiled cutely at him. Nice to meet you, Sasuke-kun. Sasuke nodded. Greetings to you as well. But I'm sorry to say to you that the movies you see highlight absolutely nothing of the life of a shinobi. He trailed off, seeing she hadn't let go of his hand. Blushing she muttered her apologies, releasing her hold quickly. As I was saying, the life of a shinobi has nothing to do with glamour and fame. We're soldiers, essentially extensions to the whim of our Hokage. Nothing more, nothing less. He recounted Naruto's words. It was rare, but Naruto would sit them down and speak to them about life. Specifically the life they chose to inherit and the weight of it all. And he had to admit he loved their talks, because the blonde Jonin was incredibly insightful. Each day was almost like learning a new lesson in philosophy. Straight to the point and blunt, Naruto held nothing back. He absorbed every word. Aiko looked shocked. Oh my, I never knew that. I always thought. She tried of looking abashed. Forgive me, Sasuke-kun. That must have been incredibly insulting. Sasuke waved off her apology, wondering why he suddenly felt relaxed in her presence. The kunai in his grip suddenly felt heavy. His mouth moved on its own accord. So what about you? Aiko blushed. Me? What about me? She echoed. He looked at her, not realizing he had pocketed his kunai. I want to know more about you. The words left his mouth before his brain realized it. What the fuck? He raged inside his mind. Why am I acting like this? Aiko blushed again, absently twirling her beautiful dark hair. Her mouth opened, but Sasuke didn't hear any of it. His eyes were utterly entranced by the way her mouth moved, the way her tongue licked her pink lips as she spoke. He swallowed heavily, letting his gaze travel lower to run over her black kimono that highlighted her curves perfectly. His eyes found her generous chest that rose and fell with each breath she took. Finding her face again, he locked gazes with her pretty brown eyes, and he couldn't stop himself as he felt his body begin to gravitate towards her. Focus! He snapped out of his trance as the sound of Naruto's voice reverberated through his mind. Focus is always key. He remembered his sensei's words and growled inside of his mind. Get it the fuck together. Focus, Sasuke. He repeated the line like a mantra inside of his head before he breathed deeply, and his dark gaze found Aiko's blushing face. She could have sworn he was just about to kiss her. Trying to ease the awkwardness, she blurted the first thing that came to mind. Would you like something to drink, Sasuke-kun? How can she be so trusting? So innocent? Did she not suspect a thing? Sasuke nodded stiffly. Yes, please. She smiled before she made her way into the kitchen. Sasuke meanwhile was inwardly cursed before he ran a hand through his hair. Just do it, Sasuke. Do it and walk away. Nodding to himself, he rose from the couch and silently walked into the kitchen, appearing behind her. Palming his kunai, he paused, taking a moment to prepare himself. Aim for the back. Straight for the brain. Quick and painless. His arm lifted to strike before a sound made him freeze. She began to hum to herself. Warming the tea on the stove and mixing ingredients, she began to hum a soft tune. So beautiful, angelic. His mother would always hum when she was in the kitchen. He always loved the sound, the soft melody soothing his aching bones after a long day of training. Suddenly it wasn't Aiko standing before him but his mother. clad in her usual black dress and long beautiful dark hair. His arm dropped limply to his side. Focus. The word reverberated in his mind, but the lull of his mother's voice was strong, overbearing the whispers to regain control. Caught in a trance, his other arm stretched out and grasped the silky hair in his fingers like he would always do. The phantom image spun and his mother looked at him with her loving gaze. Sasuke, stop playing with my hair. The image distorted and there was a blushing Aiko looking at him. Ah, Sasuke-kun, why are you touching my hair? Broken out of his trance, he blinked, stepping back from her. Aiko-san. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. She held up her hand, stopping him. No, it's okay, I mean, it's alright if you want to touch it, my hair I mean. She trailed off, her face redder than a tomato. Sasuke-kun, I think you're really cute. She bit her lip. That's why I kinda invited you in. You like a nice person. He didn't say reply. How could he? She smiled again before she returned to making tea. A warm mug was soon put into his hand. Being bold, she slipped her hand into his and directed him back to the couch. Seated, she sipped her tea before glancing at him. After a while of staring, she pouted. Well, aren't you going to try it? Robotically, he put the mug to his lips and took a sip. It tasted like honey. Sweet. She frowned. Do you like it? Sasuke slowly nodded. She smiled again before she quietly began to hum to herself. Meanwhile, Sasuke stared at her in wonder. How could she be so kind? How could she just be so at ease? He was sent to kill her. And yet she smiled. That damn smile. How he could just sit and stare at that smile, how could he kill her? Just how? Kill. His eye widened at the whisper in his head. What had he been training his whole life for? To kill that man, and now he had the audacity to not even kill a single girl. Rage filled him. Bolting from the chair, he threw the mug against the wall, the sound of it shattering causing Aiko to jump in fright. He began to pace around the room, his breathing harsh, as he wondered why he couldn't just kill her. Brown eyes watched him move back and forth. Calmly resting her half-finished tea on a small coffee table, Aiko rose to her feet. Sasuke-kun. She softly whispered his name. When burning red eyes snapped to her, she flinched. Sasuke tore his eyes from before he continued his pacing, his hands pulling at his hair. He stopped his angry pacing when he came before a large mirror. Staring at his reflection, he saw her image take a hesitant step towards him in the background. Weak. His eyes snapped back to his reflection, only now it wasn't his own image staring back at him. Itachi's face bore an indifferent gaze on him. Pitiful. You don't have the hate. The image scoffed, its gaze turning to one of pity. I wasted my time leaving you alive. With a snarl, he punched the glass, shattering the image. He slapped his bloody hand against the wall, placing his head against the broken mirror. This should have been easy. He thought he could just kill her and be done with it. Simple enough. Kill her and walk away, a true genin of Konoha. It should have. A warm hand settled on his shoulder, halting his thoughts. Sasuke-kun. There was that warm voice of hers. Sasuke felt his heart ache in betrayal. Aiko-san. He began. I'm not who you think I am. Her hand tightened on his shoulder and he allowed himself to be slowly turned around to face her. She was giving him a small smile. You're Sasuke Uchiha, aren't you? The last surviving member of the Uchiha clan. A hand settled on his face. I don't think you could be anyone else. Try as he may, the shaking started and his eyes became bright with unshed tears. His Sharingan twirled on instinct, halting the threatening flow from ever leaving his eyes. His gaze lowered to the ground, the sound of his knuckles cracking, from his tightened fist. She hesitated at first, but then slowly leaned forward and gave him a warm hug. It's all right. She whispered consolingly, rubbing circles on his back. Sasuke didn't return the embrace. Taking his shaking as a different emotion, she tightened her arms around him, the scent of her body filling his nostrils. Vanilla, so much like his mother. His arms betrayed him as they slowly wrapped around her. How could she? Pitiful. His eyes snapped open. How do you expect to kill me, if you can't even take a life? Raw burning rage filled his shaking body. Yes, hate, let hate fuel your strength. His arms tightly wrapped around her, pinning her against his chest. When you possess the same eyes as I do, come before me. His arms pressed against her neck, suffocating her face into chest. Her eyes wide open in shock, Aiko pushed against his chest out of reflex in a futile struggle. Her muffled whimpers filled the empty kitchen as her hands tried with all their strength to force herself out of Sasuke's iron grip. Her eyes burned with tears as she felt her heaving breaths denied the oxygen her lungs demanded. Sharp nails tried to scratch his face, and Sasuke, unflinching, let them cut into his flesh and rip his shirt from her desperate struggles. Her natural instinct of survival was automatically activated and she was doing whatever she could to live. To continue to exist. A hopeless struggle. Her arms were growing weaker by the second. Her whimpers were dying down. His shirt was now wet with tears as her hands grabbed his arms almost pleadingly. She was begging, "My foolish little brother." Hatred fueled his veins, the primal urge of the Uchiha passed down through the centuries flooded his system. With a snarl his arms twisted her neck. Snap! The sound was loud as it echoed through the empty kitchen. Her body limply fell from his hands, dropping to its knees, her head having turned a complete 180 with a bone protruding from her neck. The signals from her brain were still being sent to her arms, as they continued to flail wildly. From her throat came a screeching, scratching sound that chilled his bones, before her body dropped lifelessly to the ground. From the position of her head she literally hit the ground face first. Sasuke let out a shuddering breath, his form trembling as he stared down at her lifeless body. Unknowingly, his Sharingan twirled, forming a third Tomo. Sharper clarity encompassed his vision, granting him the sight to see the final flicker of chakra evaporate from her dead body. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his breathing becoming harsh. "I didn't mean to." He had been angry, filled with rage at his brother's whispers. He never meant to kill her so harshly, so violent. A wet substance hit his hand and he glanced down to find a speck of water slowly trailing down his fingers. His hand slowly came to his face, wiping away the tears he didn't even feel, starting to fall. It had been so long since he had cried. Going so long without this emotion almost seemed alien to him. A hand settled on his shoulder, glancing to the gloved hand, and then upwards towards Naruto's understanding face. The floodgates opened as tears finally began to fall. He didn't even realize when his face found his sensei's green vest. He didn't even feel the hug that encompassed him. "It's okay, Sasuke," Naruto whispered. "It's okay." He shuddered, before a betraying sound escaped his mouth. Before long his final restraints were broken as his cries filled the silent kitchen. His shaking arms tightened around his sensei as he let out the bottling emotions that he had hidden for so long. Naruto only wrapped his arms around tighter around the boy. Glancing over Sasuke's dark locks at the girl's body he grimaced. "That was brutal." He inwardly shuddered at the thought that this was only the first kill. His other genin still had their targets. He glanced down at Sasuke, his whimpers echoing through the empty house. If things were already this bad, he grimaced to think what his other genin would go through. Sakura sneezed as a chill passed through her body. She wrapped her arms around herself, rubbing at her exposed arms in a vain attempt to warm herself from the chilling breeze that suddenly started to blow. It had already been more than an hour of her walking aimless searching for her target. Glancing at her picture she frowned. Takashi Sato. He was a dark-haired boy with big green eyes. His mother worked in the salmon industry of the village. She was one of the workers that had been poisoning the fish and shipping it to Konoha. His file read that his father also worked in the industry but usually worked late hours. Takashi was only 8 years old. The Sato family residence was a supposed water house on the river, so her feet carried her to the large docks of the village. Walking across the shaky piers she saw water homes all around her floating steady in the water. All of them had boats beside them docked in the river. Searching for the specific home she was momentarily distracted by the sound of children. Running past the pink-haired girl a group of boys raced across the piers before hopping in a nearby boat, their cries of joy and laughter echoing throughout the quiet docks. Following curiously her feet led her to the boat they had jumped in. It was a large canoe painted ivy leaf symbols. 5 curious eyes met hers when she walked up to canoe. Smiling nervously she waved a hand. Hi. Do any of you know Takashi Sato?" A blonde-haired boy nodded his head. "Oh, why lookin' for Takababy? He hangs by the dock edge makin' his toys." His voice was mocking and all the boys shared a laugh. "What a loser." Frowning she nodded silently and continued her trek across the piers. It was obvious that those kids were bullies. This made the situation already worse. The kid was bullied and not even all that well liked. Great! A seated figure caught her attention and her feet brought her close enough to see a young boy sitting with his feet dangling over the piers and working on something in his hands. Making sure her footsteps were heard, the young boy glanced over his shoulder and frowned at her. He was a red-headed boy, his face round and littered with freckles. Stopping directly beside him, she offered a small smile. "Hi there." Takashi frowned before turning back to the objects in his hand. Walking closer to peer over his shoulder at the object, she paused. It was a wooden boat magnificently designed with patterns of a leaf and even had a small metal mass attached. "Did you make that yourself?" she asked. Pausing his chipping with a small knife, he glanced up to her. "Yeah." He looked away shyly. "Are you here to make fun of me like the others?" Sitting beside the boy, she smiled at him. "No, I'm not here to make fun of you. I'm just here to kill you." "That's a really nice boat." He smiled hesitantly her. "You really think so?" he said timidly. "All the other kids call me weird and stuff for making these." Sakura huffed, crossing her arms. "Well, those kids are stupid. You have an amazing talent." The young boy smiled at that, showing her a row of missing teeth. "Thanks, Sakura," she greeted. Her eyebrows rose as the young boy offered a chubby hand. Smiling, she shook it. "I'm Takashi, soon to be super awesome boat builder, and it's nice to meet you, Sakura-chan." She smiled, the carefully practiced expression she had been working on ever since the start of this test. This young boy in front of her was filled with hopes and dreams for the future. He hadn't even begun life yet, he was already destined to die. "Do you want to be my friend, Sakura-chan?" The question surprised the girl before her eyes began to burn with unshed tears. Putting a brave smile on her face, she nodded, earning a shout of joy from the young boy. He abruptly stood, exposing his torn green overalls and worn-out boots. "Come on, Sakura-chan, I have to invite you to my house." Sakura panicked at that, shaking her head. "And no, I'm sorry, Takashi, but I'm going to have to refuse. She should just kill him right here and now." They were on the docks and no one was around. She could just use the running river to hide the body. It would be an easy kill. But at his broken face, her resolve weakened. Ignoring the warnings in her head, she gave him a small smile before nodding. "Fine, I'll come with you." Takashi's mood did a 180 as he let out another shout of joy. Ushering her to her feet, he grabbed her hand and took off, running down the pliers. Sakura nearly tripped on her feet, trying to match the young boy's speed. How could such a small boy run so fast? Slowing down, they came across a small water home, which looked like it had seen better days. The young boy pulled out a key and opened the door before inviting her inside. "Pops, I'm home," he announced. Sakura's eyes widened. His father? He was supposed to be working late. Only his mother was to be at home. Funny how she never heard Takashi call out her name, like he did his father. The young boy's answer was in the form of grunt, before footsteps were heard coming from a small living room. A gruff-looking man appeared, idly scratching at his thick goatee. Sakura had to stifle a gag as the smell of alcohol oozed from the man. The drunk took a shot of the bottle in his hand before he pointed a finger at the kunoichi. "Who's the girl?" He glanced at her exotic pink hair. "Are you a whore?" Takashi scowled, his face red with embarrassment. "Dad! This is my new friend Sakura-chan." He turned to the frowning girl, smiling sheepishly. "Sorry about that. This my dad, Akashi." Sakura only nodded in greeting, glancing at the man with who had the same features as his son, only he didn't have freckles. Akashi idly scratched a stain on the black overalls he adorned, downing another gulp of alcohol. He rudely let out a loud burp before turning on his heel and entering the living room. "PFF, whatever." With a sigh, he sat himself back into an armchair in front of an old-looking TV. Takashi tugged on her hand. "Come on, Sakura-chan, I'll show you my room." Their house was hopelessly small. Passing the living room, Sakura could see there was a fridge at the other end and small table, signifying that their living room was also their kitchen. It only took a few steps for them to come up to Takashi's room. He led her inside and Sakura's mouth promptly fell open. His room was filled with countless designs of wooden boats ranging from all sizes. Some were a step above from the one she had seen, adorned with sails and ropes. Some even had miniature metal cannons on them. Her green eyes stared around the room in wonder before they found his smiling face. "Pretty neat, eh? This here is my sanctuary." His smile turned humorless. Those stupid bullies can't reach me here. Sakura nodded before she felt the stinging sensation of tears. How could she kill this young boy? He was full of such promise, so young and filled with life. Gazing at his innocent dark eyes, her resolve crumbled and a sob escaped her mouth. She tried and failed to muffle the sound by clamping a hand over her mouth. Takashi, seeing her expression, panicked. Sakura-chan, are you okay? What's wrong? The young boy tugged on the edge of her red dress before he wrapped his small frame around her. Don't cry, Sakura-chan. My mommy always used to say a hug could cure tears. Despite her bubbling emotions, she managed a tearful smile. Your mommy sounds like a good person. Taking a few moments to compose herself, she offered the young boy a thankful smile before she frowned. Where is your mother, by the way, Takashi? The young boy untangled himself from her, before he walked towards one of his magnificent designs. She died, a few weeks ago. He whispered. Reaching into the pockets of his overalls, he pulled out a picture of beautiful dark-haired woman. She was poisoned. His back was to her. It was now or never. Sakura stared at his back, as she silently pulled out kunai in her shaking hands. If she wanted to stay with Team 7, she had to pass this test. She had to listen. Just do it, okay? Please. Naruto's voice echoed through her head. Her face turned to one of determination and she silently moved forward till she was behind the boy. She held her kunai forward, pointed at his neck. You'll murder, you'll steal, rape, bribe, intimidate, seduce, torture and do many, many more. She drew her hand back, kunai poised and ready to strike. All in the name of Konoha. The boy turned around, his gaze tearful before he froze, seeing her, the knife in her hand. Sakura-chan, what are you doing? Her gaze tearful, Sakura bit back a sob. Forgive me, Takashi. Before her kunai could strike, the room door flew open and an enraged Akashi barged into the room. Sakura froze wide-eyed at the red-eyed man who snarled at her. Konoha slut. Before Sakura could react, the bottle the man held in his hand smashed over her head, knocking her to the floor. Using the broken bottle as a makeshift knife, he straddled her waist, pinning her with his weight. He rose the bottle, prepared to stab it in her throat. No! Stop, Dad! Takashi used the small boat he kept in his pocket and smashed it over his father's head, stunning the man. He continued his blows till the man was forced to drop the broken bottle and used his hands to protect his head. Recovering, he rose his elbow and smashed into Takashi's face, knocking the young boy out. Gaze momentarily softening, he grit his teeth, before his expression became one of rage as he glared down at the stunned Sakura. Feeling vindictive, he wrapped his arms around her throat. Sakura desperately tried to free herself using her arms as an attempt to push the man off of her, but he used his knees and pinned her arms down. Furito-sama was right. He spit in her face, his gaze turning to one of madness. Konoha would send the dogs. Lucky me, I got a bitch. Sakura increased her struggles with all her strength, but the large man kept her pinned with his body weight. One hand was kept around her throat as the other slowly began to run down her body. Konoha slut. By the time I'm finished with you, you'll be begging for death. His insane smile turned predatory as lowered his face to hers, his alcoholic breath fanning her teary face. I'm going to handle you right. Sakura let out a scream, trying with all might to get this man off of her. Akashi let out a mocking laugh. I love it when they scream. He let out a shout of pain as the broken bottle he dropped was stabbed into his shoulder. Takashi jumped on his own father, using his small arms to usher blows to the man's head. Get off her. Sakura-chan is my friend. Akashi struck widely, his elbow striking the young boy's nose so hard a sickening crack was heard before the boy limply dropped to ground, his head impacting the ground with a dull thump. His breathing harsh, Akashi reached up and roughly pulled out the broken bottle embedded in his shoulder, wincing at the broken glass. Shuddering in pain, he glanced to his son, seeing a trail of blood flowing from the young boy's nose, quickly forming a pool of blood around him. He shook his head in regret. He never even loved the boy anyways. His gaze turned back to Sakura and he sneered at her horrified gaze, her eyes focused on the unmoving Takashi. See what you made me do, bitch? I fucking killed my own son. You fucking Konoha whore, ack. Sakura let out a snarl that chilled the man as he found himself flipped over and pinned under the furious Kunoichi. She had used Takashi's timely intervention as a moment to free her arms and gather chakra to her muscles. The kunai she held, her hand struck down on the screaming Akashi. Wait. Please why? The knife pierced his throat before being pulled back and slammed into his neck again and again. Flaring arms that had tried to get the young girl off of him dropped limply to the ground. Sakura didn't stop her stabs even as the man stopped moving. The force of her movements caused his blood to splash up on her face, covering her hair and coating her face with the red liquid. She continued her motions, her gaze literally seeing red from her rage. Slick, 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 slick. Her next strike was halted by a gloved hand. Instinctively she struck out with her other hand and the blow was halted just as swiftly as her previous strike. Her green eyes focused on the blank face of Naruto, who stared at her before slowly removing the bloodied kunai from her hands. Her breathing harsh Sakura cast a confused look to Naruto before her eyes went wide and her gaze turned to body she was straddling. Naruto had to quickly pull her hair out of the way as she puked all over the floor. He held her hair back with one hand, the other patting her back, easing the retching motions of her violent coughs. His single eye focused on the body before the girl and it took every ounce of his training not to wince at the scene. Akashi's face was beyond recognition. His face was split open down the middle, exposing chunks and pieces of his mashed brain, and few pieces of his badly mangled jaw. Said jaw was hanging off the side of his mouth in such a way that Sakura's retching made it move with phantom motions. Pieces of white caught his eye and Naruto could only guess that was what remained of the man's eyes that littered around the room. A piece of his nose was mashed on the wall. Sensing Sakura finally finished her puking, he ushered the girl to her feet, before he winced as the girl threw herself into his arms. Her body racked with sobs as her cries filled the silent room and Naruto consoled the girl with a warm hug. "Sensei." She sniffed. He tried to. She trailed off as another sob escaped her throat. Naruto didn't need her to explain. He had been watching, shivering with rage at the man. Despite being told not to intervene under any circumstances, Akashi would have been decapitated a few seconds later if Sakura had not reversed the situation. Naruto only wrapped his arms tighter around the girl, not minding the blood that stained his mask, as he pushed his face into her hair. "Sakura," he whispered. He rubbed comforting circles into her back, settling himself to allow the girl to get it out of her system. Her cries soon quieted before the girl passed out in his arms from the emotional strain. Naruto adjusted the girl in his arms, securing one hand under her thigh, and the other under her back, hoisting her against his chest. He gazed blankly at the dead Akashi before his gaze moved to the young boy on the other side of the room. He stared at the scene before his voice rang out in the quiet room. "Come out." It wasn't a request. An umbu melted out of a dark corner in the room before the Black Ops member walked silently to stand in front of Naruto. "The girl still has to kill her target." Naruto narrowed his eye, but his expression changed as the umbu member reached up and removed his mask. "But for you, Naruto-senpai," she passed nonetheless. "Tenzu." Naruto greeted. "I'm surprised to see your face here." Tenzu bowed in greeting before his face took on a smirk. "It's been a while, Naruto-senpai. I must say you scared some umbu by the show you made at the village entrance." Naruto smirked. "But I must also inform you that I go by the name Yamato these days." Naruto scoffed. "Whatever name you go by, you'll still be my underling." He finished with an eye smile. Yamato frowned at that. "Yes, senpai, I haven't forgot the days you bullied me." His eyes narrowed. "You still do." Naruto let out a laugh. "Hush, you were always too fun to pick on." Yamato tiredly rubbed his temples, remembering the days he had first been introduced to Naruto. Kakashi had been bad enough, but Naruto had spent every second of the day making his life miserable when he had been under his squad. Every day. "Anyways, Yamato, is that boy still alive?" Naruto's voice brought him back to the present. He silently walked to the boy and put his fingers against his pulse. He nodded. "He's still alive, senpai, but it seems he'll soon choke to death from the blood." Indeed, the amount of blood leaking out his nose was slowly dripping into his mouth and forming a small puddle around him. Naruto sighed and was about to speak before Yamato interrupted him. "Don't worry, senpai." He drew his sword. "I'll make it quick and painless." Naruto thanked the man with a nod and disappeared with Sakura in body flicker, leaving Yamato with the young boy. He smirked before his face became blank and turned his attention to the young Takashi. The boy had tried to protect her. Such a shame. His sword flashed and a squelch was heard. Konohamaru walked through the village, scratching his head at the direction he was giving. Never one for directions, he let out a sigh of frustration, looking around the village as the sky darkened. Yep. He was lost. He held up the picture of his target, a boy about his age with short dark blue hair and intense dark eyes. Sora, said to be an orphan that worked for the village leader as a messenger. It read here that those two were awfully close. His reading was interrupted as he felt the ground begin to shake and his eyes went wide as four giant gates emerged from the surrounding the village. Staring in wonder at the large structures, he blinked as a purple barrier formed around the village before solidifying with an ethereal glow. Before he could mouth his surprise at the sight, he was knocked over and sent tumbling to the ground by a sprinting boy. Groaning, he pushed himself up, trying to stop his spinning head. A hand was thrust into his face, before he gratefully accepted it. "I'm sorry." The stranger quickly apologized, helping him to his feet. Konohamaru stood up, dusting himself off before he froze at the boy who had crashed into him. Sora picked up the paper Konohamaru had dropped before he held it in his direction, smiling politely. "My apologies, I was in a rush and..." He trailed off, seeing Konohamaru's headband, and then glanced at the paper in his hands. Konohamaru tried to grab the boy, but he threw the paper in his face and took off running down the street. Konohamaru gave chase, cursing on his indecisiveness. The street was empty save for the two boys as they raced down the street. Palming a kunai, Konohamaru threw the blade, but was blocked by the Sora with a triple-bladed claw. Sora followed up with another attack, pushing chakra to his hand, and swiping his palm through the air. Beast-tearing palm. A wave of sharp wind sailed through the air straight to Konohamaru. Cursing, he flashed through hand seals and slapped his palms to the earth. Earth release, mud wall. A wall of earth rose up, blocking the sharp wind attack save for the thin line that stretched across it. Sora smirked at his opponent's move and used the momentary earth wall to power his next move. Focusing his chakra, he let out a shout as demonic claw-like hand stretched out and smashed through the earth wall. Beast-tearing gale palm. Konohamaru, who was behind the wall, fell to the ground before he disappeared in poof of smoke. Eyes wide, Sora turned just in time to receive a blow to the face that launched him through the air before he hit the ground and used his momentum to roll to his feet, wincing. "Damn, that guy hits hard," he thought to himself. He spit out some blood before growling at the young Sarutobi. "Piece of shit, Konohanin. You screwed yourself the moment you stepped into this village." Focusing his chakra, he shot forward at incredible speed, his claw poised to strike. Flipping out another kunai, Konohamaru engaged the enraged boy, blocking his wild slashes with lethal precision. Sora snarled as the boy danced around him, his movements swift as for every strike he blocked he returned with a slash of his kunai. Sora grit his teeth as a slash nicked his arm, and he roared as struck out with a wide arc of his claw. But before his slash could connect, his arm was caught by his wrist, his claws stopping inches from Konohamaru's shoulder. The Genin struck with his kunai, aimed at his stomach, but his arm was caught, held fast, by the enraged boy. A battle of power ensued between the two as they tried to overpower one another. Konohamaru's face was blank, save for the narrowing of his eye as pushed chakra to his limbs and his kunai began to edge closer to boy's stomach. At the cold feel of metal penetrating his stomach, Sora snarled as chakra exploded off his form. Konohamaru had to bite back a wince as he backpedaled from the boy, saving himself from being cut from the wind chakra that radiated his form. Sora smirked as he focused the chakra to his triple blade claw, extending its reach. With a shout, he charged Konohamaru, who flashed through hand seals again and spit out a cloud of smoke that obscured Sora's vision. But before the boy could blow away the smoke, he heard the click of teeth and screamed as the cloud of smoke exploded, setting him on fire. Konohamaru watched dispassionately as the young boy screamed at being burned alive. Seeing death was nothing new to him. Glancing around, he checked to see if anyone would come running from the sound of Sora's scream, but the street was still eerily deserted. Frowning, he turned his attention back to boy, hearing his scream had quieted as the fire finally burned out. He walked slowly towards the unmoving boy, a kunai held in his hand, and stopped when he came close to him. The black attire the boy wore was completely burned off his form save for his pants. His skin was black and charred, and the smell of burnt flesh made his nose tingle. Nudging him with his foot, he saw his body remained unresponsive. Twirling his kunai, he held it downwards, poised to strike before he froze at the red eyes that snapped open. Not wanting to repeat his same mistake, he struck down as hard as he could but was blown back the eruption of red chakra that exploded from the burnt boy. Skin rapidly healing, Sora let out a scream of pain as his burns healed right before Konohamaru's astonished eyes. The chakra around Sora bubbled till it formed a chakra cloak, condensing in the shape of a tail with fox ears. What, this chakra, how? Konohamaru whispered. How did this boy have the Kyuubi's chakra? Was he another Jinchuriki as well? His thoughts halted as a familiar dark voice echoed in his head. Kill him. Konohamaru grabbed his head in pain as red chakra began to form around him. Destroy him. No. Fuck off. He shouted as his body was racked with pain. Devour this pretender. He let out a shout of pain as a chakra shroud surrounded him, and like Sora, the red chakra bubbled and condensed into the shape of a tail with fox ears. Kill him. No. Konohamaru let out a feral roar as he was overcome by the power of the Kyuubi's chakra. His form went to all fours, snarling at Sora, who did the same before charging the Jinchuriki. His blow struck Konohamaru but did little to stun the Jinchuriki, who returned the blow tenfold. His blow struck with such force that a ripple raced through the air from impact and Sora's red form was launched through buildings, leaving a trail of destruction. Konohamaru let out another roar as another tail formed before he took off after the fake container. Outside of the village, a large tent was set up for teams that took SD, serving as recovery for teams that had either passed or failed. Counselors were busy at work talking those select few whose mind had broken under the mental strain of the test. Asuma looked over at screaming Genin with pity before he focused his attention on his own team. Thank Kami that none of you broke. He whispered with a sigh. His team had thankfully passed finding and eliminating their targets before their time ran out. The trio didn't answer him. They were in no mood to. Is this what it truly means to be a shinobi, Asuma-sensei? His gaze found Shikamaru's as the boy silently stared him, awaiting his reply. Puffing on his cigarette, Asuma sighed before scratching his beard. A shinobi is one who endures. He answered the young genius. Self-sacrifice is the way of the shinobi. Shikamaru nodded before casting a glance at the crying Ino, who was using Chuji's shirt as a tissue. The young Amichiki looked like he went through hell. He gritted his teeth, halting the stinging tears. After today, nothing would be the same. Asuma lightly shook his head, before giving a glance to those teams who had suffered. He fixed Kurenai a look of pity as she stood with tears running down her face, flanked by her two genin, as a screaming Hinata madly chanted as she was sedated by the medics. She had been one of the poor genin to snap. Kurenai was devastated. Her other genin had passed, killing their targets. Hinata technically did pass, as she managed to kill her target. He knew that Kurenai had lent a hand, but her mind somehow broke and the young girl became a wreck. He glanced around at the other teams, catching the few teams that had passed. Guy was with his team consoling his crying female student. He couldn't remember her name, while her other teammates sat stone-faced. His attention was turned to a smiling Aoba who looked like he had won the lottery. His team had somehow passed with flying colors. Asuma found it funny that Aoba's team couldn't pass the Chunin exams. It was going to be their 7th-year try, but they could pass Konoha's S.D. That Kabuto kid of his was a strange one. Blonde caught his eye and he turned to see Naruto watching the two members of his team console one another. He heard they both killed their targets brutally. Walking over to Naruto, he stood silently beside him before nodding his head at the two. Where's Konohamaru? Naruto didn't answer for a few moments. He just stared at the hugging teammates who silently cried. He's still out there. The real me is trying to locate him. Asuma nodded at the clone before he puffed on his cigarette. Do you think he'll pass? Naruto let a smile come to his face before he lightly shook his head. It's Konohamaru we're talking about here, that boy. He trailed off and tensed. Asuma frowned at him, looking alert for any signs of danger. What is it? What's wrong? He too stopped as he felt it. Soon everyone in the tent tensed up as they felt a wave of terrifying chakra wash over them. The Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto immediately responded, barking out orders. Counselors and genin remain here. Umbu guards remain at your post. All Jonin Sensei who can follow, come with me. No one questioned his order. They only nodded as the Jonin took off after the blonde, struggling to keep up with his speed. They raced out of the ten, through the dense forest at a heart-pounding pace. After a few moments the familiar sound of running water was heard and they exited a clearing coming before the village. But before they could enter the village they were forced to halt as the ground started to shake and giant gate emerged from the ground in front of the amassed shinobi. What the hell is that? Before anyone could respond they felt tremors vibrating through the ground, and in the distance they could see 3 more giant gates like the one in front of them, emerge from the ground. Naruto widened his seeing their position. Each of them was at the north, south, east and west sectors of the village. This is a barrier gate 5 seals technique. His shout caused the amassed ninja to let out mumbles of confusion. Asuma frowned at him. What's that? It's a barrier technique to prevent, no wait. His shout wasn't heard by one of the Jonin that moved forward to the village. Before the man could even enter, a purple dome barrier formed over the village and the man couldn't stop himself in time. As soon as he came in contact with the barrier he was set aflame, his screams chilling to the bone, as he was burned alive. Someone acted quickly using a water jutsu and doused the flames. A dark-haired woman rushed to him quickly before she ran green glowing hands along his charred form. Sighing and stopping her jutsu, she looked up sadly at the group, shaking her head. Naruto sighed as the amassed group began to curse. What the fuck? So now no one can either enter or leave. Some genin are still in there. Naruto lifted his headband, exposing his Sharingan eye. He walked towards the barrier before his fist became encased with lightning and the sound of chirping birds filled the air. Raikiri! His attack struck, but the barrier only gave a pulse. He had to hiss, drawing his arm back as it was covered in burns. The medic immediately rushed to help him, but he stopped her with a hand. Don't bother, I'm just a shadow clone. His eyes turned the group. Everyone, let's try and hit this barrier at a single point with some jutsu. He got nods of agreement before joined the group and flashed through hand seals. Fire release, fireball jutsu. Fire release, dragon flame bomb. Water release, rushing wave. Water release, jet pistol. Wind release, vacuum wave. Wind release, vacuum sphere. Lightning release, electric judgment. Lightning release, shock bolt. Earth release, rock wave. Jutsu rained down on the barrier, each shinobi overloading their jutsu with chakra. After a few moments they cut off the flow of chakra to their attacks, panting at expenditure of energy. When the smoke cleared, the barrier remained unscathed from their attacks. Their expressions immediately turned to frustration at the wasted effort. Just how strong was the barrier? Asuma took a minute to collect his breath before he wiped away a trail of sweat. Well, that was a waste. He drawled. Naruto meanwhile ran a hand through his hair before he tensed again as his chakra began to fluctuate wildly. Both his eyes went wide in alarm. He was sure he just felt two sources of Kyubi chakra. Feeling the gravity of the situation, he breathed deeply, catching the attention of those around him before he clasped his hands together and went still. Jonin stared confusedly at his still form. Walking to stand beside Asuma, Aoba whispered into his ear. Asuma-san. What's he doing? Asuma only shrugged in response. I have no clue. Naruto's concentration broke as he felt three powerful signatures closing in on them. Everyone get back. He jumped just in time to avoid the ground that suddenly opened up from his previous position. Out of the barrier, three figures emerged, not affected by the barrier's touch, and smirked at the amassed group of shinobi. A large male with purple's tattoos on his face flexed his arm, grinning all the while. Oh man, there sure is a lot of them. An arrogant-looking dark-haired woman smirked. I hope they're worthy of a challenge. A beautiful redhead licked her lips sensually in agreement. I can't wait to give them a kiss to die for. Catching Naruto's eye, her blue eyes widened before they narrowed hungrily on his form. Blowing him a kiss, she smirked as he waved back, before letting out a hiss at the elbow he received from Kurenai. Damn, she's hot, and look at that body. He shook his head, clearing his perverted thoughts. This wasn't the time to flirt with the enemy. But seeing her rub her hand sensually along her body made it all the more harder to suppress the inner pervert. Drawing his sword, he pulsed chakra through the blade, making it extend to its normal long length before a hand clasped him on his shoulder. Looking into the steel eyes of Asuma, he rose an eyebrow. We got this, Naruto. He turned his attention to the group. Guy and Kurenai, you stay with me. The rest of you go and find a way to get through this barrier. The group nodded before they branched off, leaving Kurenai and Guy behind. Naruto frowned. You sure? He turned his attention to the enemy shinobi. From the feel of their chakra, they're powerful. Guy gave him a thumbs up. Fear not, Naruto-kun, our flames of youth shall burn these enemies blocking our path. Kurenai shook her head at Guy's antics before her red eyes found his. You're just a clone. One hit and you'd be gone anyway. Hearing the dismissal in her voice, Naruto frowned, marching up into her face. Now look here, Kurenai. If you weren't so hot I would He dispelled, holding his groin as Kurenai slowly lowered her foot. Fuka pouted at the disappearance. Ah, the yellow fong disappeared. She shook her head. He was such a hottie. Her comrades rolled their eyes at her shameless flirting. The redhead had no shame when it came to guys she found interesting. Focus. Fuin frowned at her. These three are not like the rest that ran with their tail between their legs. Fuka stuck her tongue out at her in response. Fudo just let out a snarl of frustration. Whatever bitches, I just want to kill some tree huggers. Guy frowned at the large man. I'll take the brute, I'll take the redhead. Asuma immediately responded, watching the way she licked her lips. He let out a shout as Kurenai smacked him in the head before she frowned at the final female. I'll have the last member. Sora's form was smashed into the ground hard. His chakra cloak struggled to protect him from the blows he was receiving but was slowly being overcome by the power of the real Jinchuriki. He tried to call upon more of the red chakra to power his form, but as quickly as it came it was absorbed by Konohamaru, whose blows became stronger and stronger. A third tail had already formed and the Jinchuriki was slowly overcoming the fake. They were in the village center, a large crater surrounding them from the force of their battle. It had been brutally one-sided. Sora coughed out blood as he felt the last of his chakra leave him. Who would have thought that he would run into the real Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi? His answer was in the form of fist pounding his head into the dirt so hard he felt his jaw break from the force. Not letting up on his attacks, Konohamaru viciously continued his tremendous blows, causing the crater that formed under Sora's body to grow wider with each hit. He intertwined his hands together and raised them above his head to deliver a finishing blow but was halted when a golden chain of chakra wrapped around his arms. Konohamaru's feral eyes followed the source of the chain to see it seemingly coming out the arm of his sensei. Naruto, with his Sharingan exposed, narrowed his eye at the chakra cloak enshrouding Konohamaru before his mix-matched found the blazing red of the Kyuubis. Konohamaru. Naruto began slowly. Are you in control? He slowly began to walk towards the enraged Jinchuriki, mindful to not make any sudden movements. Konohamaru's red eyes blinked before they momentarily lost their feral look. Sensei. Naruto continued his slow pace, nodding at his recognition. Yes. Using this as a sign, his chain gave a brilliant glow before it slowly began to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra. He momentarily glanced to unconscious boy underneath him, before he focused back on Konohamaru. He would need to use more chains if he wanted to truly suppress the chakra, but for now he was more worried on calming the Jinchuriki down. Konohamaru held his head in pain, giving off a light growl. Sensei, it hurts. It hurts so much. Naruto extended his other arm, letting another golden chain emerge from his wrist before it slowly moved to the Jinchuriki, swaying like a snake, before it wrapped around one of the chakra tails. Okay, Konohamaru. Naruto was beginning to sweat in concentration. I'm going to make the pain go away. Two more chains emerged from his back before they moved forward and ensnared the young Jinchuriki. Acting quickly, Naruto clapped his hands together, focusing his chakra to the chains. Suppress. His other chains gave off a brilliant glow like the first and began to suppress the bubbling red chakra. Konohamaru didn't put up any resistance other than letting out moans of pain as the chakra began to slowly recede. He tensed as he received the memories of his clone and his gaze narrowed. Shaking his head, Naruto dismissed thoughts of spanking Kurenai for later. With his Sharingan twirling, Naruto observed the many veins that covered Konohamaru's body in the way he was tightly coiled. He was in so much pain. But why? The seal was in perfect order. The pinnacle of genius achieved by his father meant to allow the Kyuubi's chakra to slowly mix with Konohamaru's own. But watching as he let out a shout of pain, Naruto knew something was wrong. It looked like wind release, Shikujo twister. Naruto snapped his attention to his right in time to witness a large twister of wind rushing towards him. Cursing, he cut off the flow of chakra to his chains, as he jumped just in the nick of time to avoid the twister as it barreled behind him. The chains were broken apart, cut into pieces by the powerful wind attack. Landing, the broken chain still connected to his form slowly receded, seemingly absorbed back into his body. His glare turned to a figure walking nonchalantly towards him. Clad in battle robes, Furito smirked at him, twirling his Shikujo staff that he had used to send his attack. I can see that speed of yours is not just a rumor. Kazuma's voice was smug. Yellow Fawn. Naruto's eyes narrowed at the man. You're Furito Tsuyoshi. He stated, earning a laugh from the man. Furito wiped a tear from his eye before he gave Naruto a mocking look. You Konoha shinobi. The lot of you are so pathetic, I almost pity you. Naruto drew his sword. Imagine that, the leader of the One King protest appears before me. You saved me the trouble of looking for you. Furito chuckled. I go by the name Kazuma, my dear boy. I'll make sure to tell your Hokage his spies are pathetic as I pierce his heart. Naruto's Sharingan glowed a menacing red in realization, so you knew the entire time. He glanced up at the purple barrier. And you set a trap, patiently waiting for us to arrive. Kazuma looked smug. But of course. Did you think word would not get out about this, S.D? And to think the daimyo himself would condone Konoha's actions. He sighed. Guess I'll have to kill him as well. Naruto blinked at him before he flipped his sword, using it as momentary cane. Mind telling me what this protest is all about? Sounds to me like you're butthurt over Konoha. His grin became a sneer. You serve under a king so corrupt that you are blinded by the fact that Konohagakure has become rotten to the core. Your leaders brainwash you with notion of the will of fire. That's nothing more than a false ideology used to make you sacrifice your lives for the village that treats you as nothing more than expendable. A carefully crafted lie over the notion of the greater good. He shook his head. Konoha has become a plague, a cancer to the land of fire. The cure to such a disease is the one true king. There can only be one. The daimyo. He threw his arms wide in a mad look coming across his face. I will end the reign of this false king and unite the land of fire under one ruler, one absolute power. I will become king and lead this nation to glory. He pointed to Sora. That boy is the key to absolute salvation. I will use him to tear a path of destruction straight to Konohagakure and erase it off the face of this earth. I will destroy Konoha. Naruto had listened to his whole monologue quietly, not uttering a word, his blank expression never changing. When the man apparently finished, he sighed. Megalomaniacs. He shook his head. Easing his sword upright, he readied himself for battle before a roar drew his attention to Konohamaru. The chakra of the nine tails was beginning to act up and chakra shroud was quickly forming again. Should I need to wrap this up quickly? Naruto thought to himself. Magnificent. That's the real Kyubi Jinkyuriki, isn't it? His reply was in the form of Naruto appearing beside him, his sword aimed to chop him in half. Using his staff, Kazuma parried the strike before jumping back to gain some distance. He frowned at his staff, seeing the chip that the blade had caused. He was enforcing it with chakra, so it should have been solid against any blade. His eyes widened as they caught sight of the sword in Naruto's hands. That's the grass cutter sword. How did you come to possess it? Naruto's only reply was pointing the sword at him, letting the blade rapidly extend so fast that Kazuma only had time to parry it, wincing as the friction of the sword caused a deeper chip into his staff. Curse that blade and its sharpness. Naruto suddenly appeared in front of him again, lightning crackling around his fist as he struck forward. The attack pierced him right through his heart before the man began to turn to mud. Naruto frowned at the clone before seeing the real Kazuma make a dash for his sword that he had dropped. Naruto simply waited for the man to get close enough before he raised his hand, causing the blade to rise and levitate towards him. He caught the blade, seeing the man's astonished gaze. Blitzing him, he engaged the man with his sword, sparks flying as metal clashed against metal. All Kazuma could do was block as the powerful strikes sent tremors down his arms. At this rate, twop! His staff was cut in half by a powerful strike before Naruto followed up with a kick that sent the man tumbling on the ground. Before Kazuma could even come to a stop, he let out a scream as his arm was impaled to the ground. His wide eyes stared at the blade indented through his wrist before he glanced up at Naruto's emotionless eyes. Wincing through the pain, he grabbed for his three-bladed claw but found his other arm pinned by Naruto's heel. Ice-cold Naruto held out his and focused his chakra as lightning encased his arm. Wasting no time, Naruto struck his hand forward, aiming to pierce right through his. Stop! The blade of Raikiri stopped millimeters from Kazuma's face. South close was the attack that the heat emitting from the sparks began to burn his nose and mouth. Drawing his arm back, but not cutting off the flow of chakra to his arm, Naruto's gaze drifted to the desperate voice, finding the pleading eyes of Sora. His face was badly mangled and his arm was broken, as he desperately tried to crawl towards them. Behind him, Konohamaru was letting out snarls as the chakra rapidly continued to grow. Please, don't kill him. Tears ran down the boy's face, as he continued his hopeless trek despite the pain he was in. He's all I have left. Naruto's Sharingan turned from one face to the other before realization struck. Ah, you're the boy's father. Focusing on the man's face, he frowned, pointing his lighting blade at the man. Why do I sense the Kyubi's chakra coming from that boy? Last time I checked there was only one Kyuubi Jinchuuriki. Kazuma only smirked, not caring he was centimeters from death. Their many was to harness the power of a tailed beast. His gaze turned defiant. Your father turned that Genin into a Jinchuuriki. Funny how he wasn't man enough to use his own son. Before the man could blink, a lightning-covered fist pierced his head. The force of the attack caused an explosion from impact, send dust and debris flying through the air. The man could have lived for a few more minutes, but he just had to mention his father. Sora screamed as he witnessed Naruto withdraw his bloody hand from whatever remained of Kazuma's head before his eyes focused on him. Stepping out of the crater he had made, Naruto fired up another Raikiri as he slowly began to walk towards Sora. He had to kill this boy. If word got back to Konoha that there was someone else that contained the Kyuubi's power, Konoha would start a war. Reaching the crying boy, Naruto stared down at him with a momentary gaze of pity. Sora didn't even register his presence, his wide eyes locked onto the dead body of his father. Why you killed him? Naruto momentarily glanced at Kazuma's body before his eyes flickered back to Sora. Yes, I did. His voice was as emotionless as his gaze as the lightning encasing his arm began to spark wildly. Eyes not showing a shred of remorse, Naruto drew his hand back, preparing his Raikiri. It would be quick, clean and painless. I'll kill you. Sora kept his attention to his dead father as the lightning attack came ever closer to his face. I'll kill you. He could feel his hairs stand on end from its proximity. I'll kill you. Red chakra exploded from his form, knocking Naruto off his feet. A shockwave resounded through the village as a beam of light shot out from the enraged false Jinchuuriki. Wincing, Naruto jumped to his feet in time to see 6 tails of chakra swirl menacingly behind the boy. Crouched down like an animal, a dark red chakra cloak took over his form, mixed with a skeleton hanging above, attached by chakra ligaments. Where his eyes were supposed to be, were pools of white. His mouth opened wide, letting out a roar of pure chakra that caused Naruto to reinforce his feet with chakra to stick the ground, lest be blown away. Another roar came from behind him and he turned to see Konohamaru enter a 4-tailed state similar to Sora's. Cursing as he realized he was in between the two, Naruto clasped his hands together and began to focus his chakra. The wind picked up, blowing harshly as a tremendous pressure filled the air. The two Jinchuuriki shifted as Naruto's powerful chakra bared down on them before they snarled, charging at him with incredible speed. Naruto slowly undid his clasped hands, a tiny ball of chakra seemingly hovering in the center of his palms. The ball grew larger in size before it formed a perfect sphere of rapidly spinning chakra. It glowed a brilliant blue, giving a distinct hum as lighting condensed around its form. The color changed to that of a pure white and the hum began to sound of mix between birds chirping. He shifted his attention, focusing on the two Jinchuuriki. He waited till they were close enough before he destabilized the chakra of the rotating orb just as they were upon his form. Rasen Bolt. He slammed his hands together. I know the killings seemed rough, but I did warn the story would be dark. Anyways, stay tuned for part 3 that will end this arc. Until next time, please review and help get this bad boy to 100 reviews. Policy. Oh, make Yamato's first day. And who might you be? The young 14-year-old glanced up at him with his dual gaze. How a young boy could look so intimidating he would never know. Yamato offered a stiff salute, tucking one arm behind his back, in perfect military protocol. Code-named Tenzu, Ninja Registration 010992, reporting for Umbu Squad Sigma, under the leadership of Captain Namikaze, reporting for duty. Sir! Naruto rose an eye at the man, no doubt hearing about the fierce Umbu who had inherited the first Hokage's famed wood release. Tenzu. He turned to his squad mates. Yugao-chan, what do you think of this guy? Cat scoffed. Sounds like a douche. Raider ran disinterested eyes over his form. Looks like he's constipated. Yamato's face didn't change, but the tightening of his jaw told them he was insulted. How far? Yamato blinked at the young captain before he raised an eyebrow. Pardon, a few inches. Naruto continued like he never heard him. 5, 10. All the way in. Yamato frowned. I have no idea what you're talking about. Naruto rose an eyebrow. I'm talking about how far did the Hokage shove his foot in your ass to make you look so stiff? I mean, you are his personal bitch, right? Yamato's mouth dropped open. What? Come now, no need to be shy. You're a sheep. Yamato sputtered. Wah. He says go, you say how fast. He says jump, you say how high. He says bend over, you say how low. He says open your mouth, you say, thump. Sir, he fainted. Cat sighed. That's the third one this week. That's it for part 3. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.